My name is Samantha, and I'm 32 years old. Growing up in our middle-class Connecticut home, I never imagined I'd lose both my parents in a single tragic car accident, let alone face the ultimate betrayal from my own sister. When our parents were revealed a shocking $12 million inheritance, something changed in Hannah. The sister I once built blanket forts with transformed before my eyes, her familiar face hardening with greed as she demanded everything that our parents had left behind. I had no idea that her victory would be so short-lived, or that karma would strike with such perfect timing. If you're watching this now, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from and hit that subscribe button to hear how justice was finally served when my sister's perfect plan fell spectacularly apart. When I think back to our childhood, the memories that surface first are of Hannah and me racing through the sprinklers in our backyard, our laughter mingling with the summer air. I was 7 and she was 9, our sisterly bond seemingly unbreakable. Our father Thomas worked as an engineer at a local medical equipment company, often bringing home prototypes and interesting gadgets for us to marvel at. Our mother Grace taught literature at the local high school, her passion for books filling our modest 4-bedroom colonial with overflowing bookshelves and the smell of well-worn paperbacks. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we never wanted for anything important. Dad was always tinkering in the garage, working on side projects even after long days at the office. Little did we know that one of those projects would change everything. When I was 15, Dad developed a breakthrough device that revolutionized non-invasive glucose monitoring for diabetics. His company saw the potential immediately and fast-tracked the development. Within 2 years, the device was patented and in production, with hospitals and clinics across the country placing orders. What started as a modest medical equipment supplier transformed into a healthcare technology leader, with Dad's invention as its flagship product. Despite the company's success and Dad's rising position, our parents remained remarkably down to earth. They stayed in the same house, drove sensible cars, and continued their careers. Mom would say, "Money changes addresses, not people," whenever Hannah would suggest moving to a bigger house or buying luxury cars. The only visible changes were a renovation to Dad's garage workspace and annual family vacations that became slightly more exotic. Hannah and I began to diverge in our teenage years. While I inherited our parents' pragmatism and service-oriented mindset, Hannah became increasingly focused on appearances and status. When she left for college at an expensive private university, the transformation accelerated. She joined the most exclusive sorority, befriended the daughters of wealthy executives, and began dating Wesley, an economics major with ambitions of Wall Street glory. By the time she graduated, the girl who once helped me rescue worms from the sidewalk after rainstorms was almost unrecognizable. Her calls home became less frequent, usually coinciding with requests for money for a new apartment in New York or designer work attire for her entry-level marketing position. Wesley and Hannah married in an extravagant ceremony that made our parents wince at the cost, though they paid for it without complaint. Meanwhile, I completed my education degree and began teaching special education at an elementary school near our hometown. Hannah made no attempt to hide her disappointment in my career choice. "All that potential wasted on finger painting with kids," she once commented at a family dinner, making our mother nearly choke on her wine. Wesley would often steer conversations toward investment opportunities, suggesting that our parents should put their money to work rather than keeping it in what he called underperforming traditional investments. Dad would listen politely before changing the subject. As Dad's company continued to grow, with expansions into international markets and additional patents, our parents' net worth increased substantially. Yet they remained private about their finances, even with us. Mom still clipped coupons and Dad still changed the oil in their cars himself. The last time we were all together was for their 35th wedding anniversary. Dad reserved a private room at their favorite Italian restaurant. Nothing fancy, but meaningful to them because they'd had their first date there. Hannah arrived an hour late, Wesley constantly checking his phone for market updates throughout dinner. When Dad proudly mentioned that I had been nominated for Teacher of the Year, Hannah rolled her eyes. "Congratulations on being the best at making minimum wage," she muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Mom shot her a disapproving look, but the moment passed as Dad brought out their anniversary gifts. Mom had restored Dad's first drafting table, the one where he'd sketched his breakthrough invention. Dad gave Mom first edition of her favorite novel, purchased secretly through a rare book dealer. The genuine joy on their faces as they exchanged these thoughtful, non-monetary gifts seemed to irritate Hannah, who exchanged glances with Wesley. As we left the restaurant, Mom hugged me tightly and whispered, "Never lose sight of what truly matters, Sammy." 2 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday evening, I received the call that changed everything. Mom and Dad had been driving home from a charity event when a semi-truck crossed the median on the highway. The impact was immediate and, according to the solemn-voiced police officer on the phone, they didn't suffer. I called Hannah immediately, my voice breaking as I shared the unthinkable news. For a brief moment, I heard my sister again, not the status-conscious woman she'd become, but the girl who had held my hand on the first day of kindergarten. We met at the hospital, falling into each other's arms in the sterile waiting room, our shared grief momentarily bridging the growing distance between us. As we identified our parents' belongings, the gold watch Dad always wore and Mom's well-worn leather planner, I thought perhaps this tragedy might bring us back together. I had no idea that within days, I would discover just how wrong I was. The days following our parents' deaths passed in a blur of arrangements and paperwork. I took charge of the funeral planning, coordinating with the church where our parents had been members for 30 years and selecting readings that reflected their values and spirit. Meanwhile, Hannah seemed oddly distracted, spending hours in Dad's home office, rifling through file cabinets and desk drawers. Our mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, noticed it too. "Your sister hasn't stopped looking at those financial documents since she arrived," she observed quietly as we prepared lunch for relatives who had come to pay respects. "Grief affects everyone differently," I replied, though a small knot of unease began to form in my stomach. The morning of the funeral, Hannah arrived in a brand new Lexus, the temporary tags still taped to the window. When Uncle Robert commented on the car, she mentioned something about needing reliability during this difficult time before quickly changing the subject. The service itself was beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. The church overflowed with colleagues, students, neighbors, and friends whose lives had been touched by our parents. Dad's entire research team came, many sharing stories of his mentorship and integrity. Former students spoke tearfully about Mom's influence on their love of literature and learning. Through it all, I noticed Hannah checking her phone repeatedly, her attention seemingly elsewhere, despite the outpouring of love for our parents. During the final eulogy, delivered by Dad's longtime friend and business partner Martin, Hannah abruptly stood and slipped out of the church. "Important call," she whispered as she squeezed past me. She didn't return until the service had ended and people were already moving toward the cemetery for the burial. At the reception afterward, Martin pulled me aside, his kind face troubled. "Samantha, I don't want to add to your burden right now, but I thought you should know. Hannah contacted me about 3 weeks ago, before the accident, asking detailed questions about your father's stake in the company and his other investments." The information settled uneasily. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "Nothing specific. I suggested she speak directly with your father about any financial concerns." He patted my hand. "Your dad was a private man about money matters, even with me. But he was also very methodical. I'm sure his affairs are in perfect order." The next day, we met with our parents' attorney, Edward Montgomery, at his downtown office. The space exuded old-world professionalism, with dark wood paneling and leather-bound law books lining the walls. Montgomery had been our parents' attorney for decades, handling everything from their wills to the patents for Dad's inventions. He offered sincere condolences before explaining that he would walk us through our parents' estate. I expected to learn about the house, perhaps some retirement accounts and life insurance. Nothing prepared me for Montgomery's next words. "Your parents' estate is valued at approximately $12 million, he stated, adjusting his reading glasses. I gasped audibly, while Hannah's eyes widened, a visible shift in her demeanor as she straightened in her chair. "That's impossible," I stammered. "They lived so modestly." Montgomery nodded understanding. "Your father's inventions became increasingly valuable as the company expanded. Additionally, he made several shrewd early investments in healthcare technology startups that performed exceptionally well. Your parents were quite wealthy, but preferred to live according to their values rather than their means." As Montgomery continued outlining assets, I noticed Hannah taking detailed notes, occasionally underscoring figures with her pen. When the meeting concluded, she immediately began asking about the timeline for distribution and whether any assets were liquid. That evening, as we sorted through our parents' belongings at their house, the first real conflict erupted. Hannah declared she would be taking Mom's entire jewelry collection, including the diamond necklace Dad had given her for their 30th anniversary. "I should have it," Hannah insisted, already placing pieces into a velvet pouch she'd brought. "I actually appreciate fine things." Mom knew that. The comment stung. "These should be divided equally," I countered. "Mom would want us both to have meaningful pieces." Hannah scoffed. "You'll probably just put them in a drawer somewhere. What's the point of having nice things if they're not used and displayed properly?" Over the next few days, I noticed Hannah arriving with empty boxes, systematically packing up artwork, crystal, and silver. When I questioned certain items, she would snap that they would just go to waste with me. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone with Wesley in the kitchen. "It's even better than we thought," she was saying in a hushed voice. "Montgomery says it's completely liquid within 60 days. Wesley arrived later that day, clipboard in hand, helping Hannah inventory furniture and valuables. As they whispered in the living room, I caught fragments of their conversation, including Wesley saying, "Once we get the full amount, we could finally pay off the..." before noticing me and abruptly changing the subject. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the ceiling wondering what had happened to the sister who once refused a new bicycle because she thought the money should go to a local animal shelter instead. Something had changed in Hannah, something beyond normal grief, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The formal reading of the will took place a week later in Montgomery's office. Hannah arrived with Wesley in tow, both dressed as if for a business meeting rather than a family matter. Montgomery carefully explained that our parents had left a straightforward will, with the estate to be divided equally between Hannah and me after specific charitable bequests to the local library and Dad's university alma mater. As Montgomery finished, I noticed Hannah's shoulders tense, her fingers tightening around her leather portfolio. "Is there a problem, Hannah?" Montgomery asked, noticing her reaction as well. "Actually, yes," she replied, her voice taking on an edge I recognized from childhood arguments. "I don't think a 50-50 split is fair or what our parents would have wanted if they had really thought it through." Montgomery looked surprised. "Your parents were quite clear about their wishes for equal distribution." Hannah leaned forward. "But circumstances change. Samantha has a stable job with a pension. She lives simply and doesn't have the financial obligations I do." Before I could respond, Hannah continued, "Wesley and I have a mortgage in Manhattan, significant investment opportunities that require capital, and..." She hesitated briefly. "We've accumulated some debt that this inheritance could resolve." "How much debt?" I asked, surprised by this revelation. Hannah exchanged glances with Wesley before answering. "About $300,000 in credit cards, plus our mortgage is underwater since the market shift." I was stunned. Despite Hannah's obvious taste for luxury, I had no idea they were in financial trouble. "Maybe you need financial counseling more than an unequal inheritance," I suggested. We could use some of the money to help you restructure your debt, but Wesley interrupted, his voice smooth as he shifted into what I recognized as his sales pitch tone. What Hannah means is that we have unique investment opportunities that could multiply this inheritance. It would be financially irresponsible not to capitalize on these market conditions. The conversation quickly deteriorated as Hannah began bringing up childhood incidents as evidence of parental favoritism. "Remember when Dad helped you buy your first car but made me work for mine?" she demanded. "Or how Mom paid for your teaching certification but questioned my marketing degree?" I was bewildered by her selective memory. "Dad helped with my car because I was working part-time at a non-profit. You were making twice my salary at your corporate internship. And Mom questioned your degree because you switched majors 4 times, not because she didn't support you." The meeting ended with nothing resolved, Montgomery suggesting we take some time to consider options. In an attempt at reconciliation, I suggested meeting for lunch the following day at the Riverside Cafe, a neutral location where we might discuss compromise. When Hannah arrived, she wasn't alone. A sharp-featured woman in an immaculate suit accompanied her, introducing herself as Stephanie Green, Hannah's attorney. "You brought a lawyer to lunch?" I asked incredulously. Hannah shrugged. "I need someone to protect my interests." What should have been a private family discussion quickly escalated into a quasi-legal negotiation, with Green suggesting that our parents had shown clear preference for Hannah in recent years. When I challenged this absurd claim, pointing out that our parents had visited me more frequently simply because I lived closer, Hannah's response left me speechless. "They visited you out of obligation," she snapped, loudly enough that nearby diners turned to look. With me, they actually enjoyed themselves. They were always disappointed in your life choices. The public scene ended with Hannah and her attorney departing abruptly, leaving me sitting alone with untouched salads and stares from curious onlookers. That evening, the text messages began. First accusations, "You always manipulated them with your goody two-shoes act." Then ultimatums, "Either agree to a 70-30 split or I'll contest the will and tie this up for years." Finally, thinly veiled threats, "I have evidence that Dad wasn't thinking clearly when he signed the latest will. Do you really want that made public?" The situation worsened when I began receiving calls from extended family members. Cousin Jennifer phoned in tears, asking why I was hiding family heirlooms that Hannah said belonged to everyone. Uncle Robert questioned whether I had influenced Dad's business decisions before his death. It became clear that Hannah was systematically contacting relatives, spinning narratives that cast me as manipulative and greedy. My best friend Alicia became my lifeline during this time, offering both emotional support and practical advice. My college roommate practices family law, she told me over coffee in my apartment. "This is textbook bullying behavior. Hannah's trying to wear you down." Through Alicia's contacts, I discovered something disturbing. Hannah had consulted with 3 different estate attorneys in the weeks before our parents' death. One of them, indiscreet after a few drinks at a bar association event, mentioned to Alicia's friend that Hannah had been inquiring about ways to challenge wills on grounds of mental incapacity nearly a month before the accident. The revelation left me physically ill. Had Hannah been planning this even while our parents were alive? My suspicions were confirmed when Wesley showed up unannounced at my apartment one evening. His usual slick demeanor was in full force as he explained he'd come to reason with me. "Hannah's very emotional right now," he explained, perching on my couch like he was conducting a business meeting. "Grief affects people differently. Is that why she's been calling family members with lies about me?" I asked. Wesley had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. "Family disagreements get messy, but I'm here to talk solutions." His proposal was breathtaking in its audacity. I would relinquish my claim to the estate except for a generous $500,000, signing over the rest to Hannah. "This way, everyone gets what they need," he explained, as if he were offering me a favor. "You keep teaching and living simply. Hannah handles the larger amount, and no one deals with costly legal battles." When I refused, his friendly facade cracked slightly. Hannah won't stop, you know. She'll fight this for years if necessary. Ask yourself if half the money is worth losing your peace of mind. As he left, his parting words chilled me. Family should stick together, Samantha. Don't make Hannah choose between you and what she deserves. Alone in my apartment that night, I realized the sister I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone willing to destroy our relationship for money our parents had never even cared about displaying. 3 days after Wesley's visit, a courier delivered a thick envelope containing formal legal notice that Hannah was contesting our parents while on grounds of undue influence. The attached affidavit contained allegations so false and hurtful that I could barely finish reading. Hannah claimed that during our father's final months, I had systematically isolated him from her, manipulating him into maintaining the equal distribution in the will despite his clear desire to provide more generously for Hannah. The document painted me as calculating and manipulative, suggesting I had taken advantage of our mother's declining cognitive function to ensure my equal share of the estate. Every claim was fabricated, twisting innocent interactions into sinister manipulations. A dinner I had arranged for our parents' anniversary became an opportunity to prevent Hannah's access. My weekly phone calls to Mom transformed into monitoring and controlling communications. The legal assault continued when I learned Hannah had hired a private investigator to document my activities. Alicia spotted the same car parked near my apartment 3 days in a row and took down the license plate. Her law enforcement contact confirmed it belonged to a private investigation firm that specialized in surveillance for civil cases. The stress began affecting every aspect of my life. Sleep became elusive, interrupted by grinding teeth and anxiety dreams where I searched empty houses for my parents. Panic attacks ambushed me in grocery store aisles and during school meetings. The dual trauma of grief and betrayal left me feeling hollowed out, going through motions of daily life while emotionally unraveling. My principal noticed my deteriorating condition and gently suggested I take personal leave. "The children need you at your best," she said kindly. "Take time to heal." With reluctance, I accepted a month's leave, using the time to start therapy with Dr. Melanie Winters, a grief counselor who specialized in family conflict. "You're experiencing complicated grief," she explained during our second session. "The natural mourning process is being interrupted and intensified by this inheritance conflict. Your sister's actions are forcing you to defend yourself when you should be processing your loss." The one bright spot during this dark period was my friendship with James, a history teacher at my school. He began checking on me daily, bringing homemade soup and fresh bread, sitting quietly with me when words failed. His steady presence became an anchor when everything else seemed to be drifting away. My brother and I didn't speak for 5 years after our grandmother's estate, he shared one evening. "Money reveals who people really are." While gathering photo albums from my parents' house, I discovered something that confirmed my worst fears about how far Hannah would go. A small recording device carefully positioned behind books on the living room shelf. With trembling hands, I confronted Hannah by phone immediately. "You're bugging the house?" "Our parents' house," I demanded. Her response was chillingly matter-of-fact. "I need evidence you're hiding assets." My attorney recommended documentation. The final confrontation happened in our parents' kitchen, where family photos still hung on the refrigerator, including one of Hannah and me building a snowman, our young faces flushed with cold and happiness. I had come to collect my remaining belongings when Hannah arrived unexpectedly. "Montgomery called," she said without preamble. "He says you're being difficult about releasing funds while the will is contested." "The court froze the estate because you contested the will," I reminded her. "Of course funds can't be distributed." Hannah's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "I need that money now, not after years of legal garbage." Wesley has investors waiting. When I suggested again that perhaps financial counseling would better address their problems, Hannah laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what real life costs." Your little teacher's salary and modest apartment. You play at being self-righteous while judging my lifestyle. I don't judge your lifestyle, I countered. I judge what you're willing to do to maintain it. The argument escalated until Hannah delivered her ultimatum, hands flat on the kitchen counter where we'd once baked Christmas cookies with Mom. Sign over everything except the $500,000 Wesley offered, or I swear I will drag this out until the lawyers take half of it anyway. Her eyes, so like our mother's in color, but nothing like hers in warmth, held mine. I've already spent against the expected inheritance. I need this, and I will not back down. Montgomery confirmed Hannah's threat was viable. She's prepared extensive documentation. Even though it's largely fabricated, disproving each claim will take time and considerable legal expense. This could easily take 2 to 3 years to resolve, with significant portions of the estate going to legal fees. That night, I sat in my parents' garden, where Dad had taught us constellation names and Mom had pressed flowers for bookmarks. The thought of their legacy being devoured by legal battles and sibling hatred was unbearable. The money had never been important to them. What they valued was family, integrity, their shared life of purpose and love. By morning, I had made my decision. I would walk away with the uncontested portion rather than fight a protracted legal battle that would destroy what remained of our family and drain the estate. I calculated that after the specific bequests and tax considerations, I could keep approximately $500,000 without Hannah's objection. It was far less than my rightful share, but it would allow me to preserve my mental health and honor our parents' memory in my own way. The signing meeting at Montgomery's office felt like surrendering to an emotional hostage situation. Hannah arrived with both Wesley and her attorney, all three dressed impeccably as if celebrating a business victory. Montgomery couldn't hide his disapproval as he presented the documents that would relinquish my claim to most of the estate. "Are you certain about this, Samantha?" he asked quietly. "The evidence Hannah has presented is questionable at best. With time, we could challenge these claims effectively." I nodded, avoiding Hannah's gaze. "I'm certain. I want this finished." As I signed my name to the documents, Hannah's face revealed a cold smirk I'd never seen before. "Perfect," she said, examining the signature. "I knew you'd see reason eventually." What hurt more than losing the inheritance was Hannah's refusal to even discuss the sentimental items. When I asked about splitting family photo albums and holiday ornaments our mother had collected for each of us, Hannah's response was swift and cutting. "The agreement covers all assets. If you wanted keepsakes, you should have negotiated that separately." Wesley reviewed the paperwork with calculating eyes, occasionally whispering clarifications to Hannah. Not once did he acknowledge the family relationship being destroyed before him, treating the situation as purely transactional. As they prepared to leave, Hannah paused at the door. "I think it's best if we take some time apart," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "For healing." The words were right, but the tone was wrong, like an actress reciting lines without understanding their meaning. "How much time?" I asked. She shrugged. "I'll be busy with some major projects. I'll reach out when things settle." We both knew she had no intention of reaching out. The following weekend, I emptied my childhood bedroom while Hannah was away on what Wesley described as a well-deserved vacation following the settlement. Every book, stuffed animal, and school certificate felt weighted with memories that Hannah had deemed worthless compared to their monetary counterparts. Alicia and James helped me move from my comfortable condo to a smaller apartment across town. The downsize was necessary after taking unpaid leave from teaching, though the settlement would keep me financially secure. "She may have gotten the money, but you kept your integrity," Alicia said as we unpacked kitchen boxes. "That's worth more than $12 million. Rather than letting the settlement money sit in bitterness, I decided to honor my parents in a way they would have appreciated. I established a memorial scholarship at the high school where Mom had taught, designating $200,000 to help disadvantaged students pursue teaching careers. The local paper ran a small article about the scholarship, quoting me about our parents' commitment to education and community service. I carefully avoided any mention of the inheritance dispute. Hannah's social media accounts began filling with evidence of her windfall. Photos of a sprawling new house in an exclusive suburb, her wrist draped with a watch I recognized as costing more than my annual teaching salary. Wesley standing proudly beside a Tesla with a personalized license plate. Most surprising was a local business magazine interview where Hannah described herself as an entrepreneur and angel investor launching a luxury hospitality concept. The article mentioned her recently acquired capital without specifying its source, creating the impression of self-made success. While Hannah documented her spending spree, I focused on rebuilding my life. I returned to teaching, finding solace in my students' uncomplicated needs and genuine affection. I volunteered at the grief support group Dr. Winters had recommended, eventually helping facilitate sessions for others experiencing family estrangement. And my friendship with James gradually deepened into something more, his quiet strength and authentic nature a stark contrast to the materialistic values that had consumed my sister. A chance encounter with Martin, my father's business partner, provided the first hint that all might not be well in Hannah's new empire. We met at a charity auction benefiting the hospital where Dad's devices were first used. "I'm concerned about some of Hannah's business decisions," he confided as we examined the silent auction items. She approached me about investing in Wesley's new hedge fund. The projected returns are suspiciously high, and when I asked for documentation, Wesley became evasive. Martin shook his head. "Your father was methodical, researching investments for months before committing funds. Hannah seems to be making impulsive decisions with large sums." His words were prophetic. Within weeks, rumors began circulating in financial circles about Wesley's investment strategies. A former colleague of Hannah's mentioned at a teacher's happy hour that several clients had withdrawn from Wesley's firm after questioning his methods. More troubling was the call from Aunt Patricia. "Hannah is selling your parents' house," she said, her voice tight with disapproval. "The realtor is hosting an estate sale next weekend. If there are any personal items you want to save, this might be your last chance." I couldn't bear to attend the estate sale, sending James instead to rescue any remaining family photos or mementos. He returned with a small box, his expression grim. "Most personal items were already gone," he reported. "But the housekeeper, Mrs. Rivera, had saved some photos and your mother's recipe book. She asked me to give them to you." The handwritten recipe cards, stained with vanilla extract and butter fingerprints, brought tears I thought had been exhausted. A week later, an anonymous package arrived containing several photo albums and a note. "These shouldn't be sold to strangers. Your mother would want you to have them." I recognized Mrs. Rivera's handwriting, her small act of kindness a stark contrast to my sister's callousness. As Hannah surrounded herself with material acquisitions, I noticed a curious pattern in our extended family's behavior. The relatives who had initially believed Hannah's stories began reaching out to me again. Cousin Jennifer invited me to her daughter's ballet recital. Uncle Robert called to share memories of Dad. It seemed the extravagant lifestyle Hannah flaunted on social media was raising questions about her claims of my financial manipulation. "People aren't stupid," Alicia observed. "They can do math. If you supposedly swindled the inheritance, why are you teaching special ed while Hannah's buying vacation properties?" I maintained a dignified silence about the settlement, never contradicting Hannah's narrative, but focusing instead on honoring our parents through the scholarship and community involvement. The local education board recognized the memorial scholarship with a small ceremony, presenting me with a plaque that now hangs in my classroom next to a photo of Mom reading to her students. Through it all, I waited for the grief to soften, for the sense of betrayal to dull. Some days were better than others. On Mom's birthday, I placed flowers at their graves alone, Hannah having sent an impersonal arrangement delivered by a high-end florist. I wondered if she ever reflected on what our parents would think of her choices, or if the comfort of wealth had completely overshadowed such considerations. I had no way of knowing that answers to these questions would come sooner and more dramatically than I could have imagined. Exactly 2 months after the settlement was finalized, I was grading papers in my classroom after school when Alicia burst in, waving her phone. "You need to see this," she said, pulling up the financial section of the city newspaper on her screen. The headlines sent a jolt through me. Federal investigation launched into Wesley Davis Investment Group amid fraud allegations. I scanned the article with growing disbelief. Wesley's firm was under investigation for misleading investors and potentially operating a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. The article mentioned recently acquired family money used to attract additional investors with promises of exclusive opportunities and extraordinary returns. Before I could fully process this information, my phone rang. It was Martin. "Have you seen the news about Wesley?" he asked without preamble. "Hannah invested nearly $8 million with his fund," he continued, his voice heavy. I tried to warn her about diversification, but she said Wesley had insider connections that guaranteed returns. Over the next several days, the situation unraveled with stunning speed. Wesley had apparently fled the country, transferring significant assets to offshore accounts before the investigation became public. Hannah's luxury resort development, prominently featured in her social media posts, had collapsed after contractors walked off the job due to bounce checks, resulting in a $2 million loss. Most devastating was the tax audit revealing Hannah had failed to properly account for estate taxes, resulting in penalties exceeding $1.5 million. The schadenfreude I expected to feel never materialized. Instead, watching my sister's life implode from a distance felt hollow and sad, another layer of loss atop the grief I was still processing. Reports of Hannah's assets being seized began circulating among family. Aunt Patricia called to say Hannah's designer clothing and cars were being repossessed, the new house listed for quick sale at a significant loss. Through it all, I maintained my distance, focusing on the approaching school year and the memorial scholarship recipients who would be announced at the fall assembly. Then the text messages started, a mirror image of those I'd received during the inheritance dispute. First came vague check-ins, "Hey, how have you been?" Then thinly veiled hints, "Things have been challenging lately." Finally, direct appeals, "Can we talk? I need some advice about financial matters." I left them unanswered, the wound still too fresh to risk reopening. Aunt Patricia provided updates whether I wanted them or not. "Hannah's been calling everyone asking for loans," she reported during our monthly lunch. She told Uncle Robert she just needs to bridge some temporary cash flow issues until Wesley resolves his misunderstanding with the government. The idea that Hannah still believed in Wesley's innocence was perhaps the most painful revelation. The first voicemail arrived on what would have been our parents' anniversary. Hannah's voice sounded strained, lacking its usual confidence. "Samantha, I know it's been a while, but I was hoping we could discuss some financial matters. Nothing major, just call me back when you can." I deleted it without responding. 2 more followed in subsequent weeks, each more desperate than the last. I maintained my silence, protected by distance and the quiet life I'd rebuilt. The direct confrontation came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was helping a student with reading difficulties when the school secretary appeared at my classroom door. "There's someone waiting to see you in the front office," she said quietly. "She says she's your sister." Hannah sat stiffly in the waiting area, a shadow of her former polished self. Her designer outfit had been replaced by department store basics, her manicure grown out, her hair lacking its usual professional styling. When she saw me, she stood quickly, smoothing her skirt with nervous hands. "Thank you for seeing me," she said formally, as if we were business acquaintances rather than sisters who had once shared everything. We walked silently to a nearby coffee shop, the awkwardness between us a physical presence. Once seated with untouched drinks before us, Hannah cleared her throat. "I'm sure you've heard about my situation," she began. When I didn't respond, she continued. "Wesley made some poor decisions. He's working to resolve them from abroad, but in the meantime, things have been challenging. Not once did she acknowledge her role in our estrangement or express remorse for her actions during the inheritance dispute. Instead, she framed her visit as a temporary setback in an otherwise successful life trajectory. "I was hoping you might consider a short-term loan," she finally said, eyes fixed on her coffee cup. "Just until Wesley's legal issues are clarified." "And how much would this short-term loan be?" I asked, my first words since greeting her. Hannah named a figure that nearly matched my entire settlement amount. "I still have excellent credit," she added quickly. "I could make it a formal arrangement with interest." The conversation felt surreal, sitting across from my only sister as she essentially asked for the inheritance she had taken from me, now lost through her own poor choices. I maintained careful boundaries, neither agreeing to her request nor rejecting her outright. "I'll need to consider this carefully," I said, gathering my belongings. Financial decisions shouldn't be made impulsively. The irony of echoing the advice she had once rejected wasn't lost on either of us. 2 days later, the final bombshell dropped. A financial news outlet published an exposé detailing Hannah and Wesley's fraudulent investment scheme. The article revealed that much of the money from my parents' estate had been used not for legitimate investments, but to pay earlier investors and fund their lavish lifestyle. Hannah now faced potential legal consequences herself, the investigation having uncovered her signatures on numerous questionable documents. When Hannah called again, her composure had completely crumbled. Through tears, she revealed that Wesley had left her with nothing, transferring their remaining liquid assets to accounts she couldn't access before disappearing. Most devastating was her confession that she had never really understood the legal documents Wesley had prepared for her signature. "I just signed what he put in front of me," she sobbed. "I trusted him. He said it was all standard language for asset protection." The sister who had prided herself on business acumen and financial sophistication had signed power of attorney documents giving Wesley complete control over her affairs. In her greed for my share of the inheritance, she had handed everything to a man who valued wealth above all else, including her. The final irony came when Hannah admitted that during the inheritance dispute, she had never actually read the full legal complaints her attorney filed. "Wesley handled all that," she said, her voice small. "He said it was just standard procedure to ensure I got what I deserved." What she deserved. The phrase echoed Wesley's words to me months earlier, a cruel symmetry in how his manipulation had come full circle. Hannah's legal settlement was finalized 6 months after Wesley's disappearance. She avoided jail time by cooperating with authorities, but the financial penalties and community service requirements were substantial. With her assets frozen and reputation in tatters, she faced a humbling reality check that no amount of designer clothing could disguise. After considerable reflection and consultation with Dr. Winters, I made a decision that surprised many who knew our history. I offered to help Hannah with basic living expenses, not the extravagant lifestyle she had become accustomed to, but enough to maintain a modest apartment and essentials while she rebuilt her life. "Why would you help her after everything?" James asked as we discussed my decision over dinner. The question was valid, and my answer surprised even me. "Because it's what our parents would have done," I replied. "Their money destroyed our relationship, but maybe it doesn't have to define our future." My help came with conditions. Hannah would need to work legitimate employment and demonstrate financial responsibility. Through Martin's connections, I arranged for her to take an administrative position at my school, a humbling step down from her previous corporate status, but steady employment with health benefits. Hannah's transformation wasn't immediate or without setbacks. The first time she saw her tiny office in the school's administrative wing, I caught a flash of the old Hannah, her nose wrinkling slightly at the fluorescent lighting and dated furniture. But necessity proved a powerful motivator, and gradually, Hannah adapted to her new circumstances. Working in education connected her to our mother's legacy in unexpected ways. As weeks turned into months, I watched my sister rediscover values that had been buried beneath years of materialistic pursuit. She volunteered for the school's book fair, remembering how our mother had done the same. She began bringing home made lunches instead of ordering expensive takeout. Small changes accumulated into a larger shift in perspective. Our parents had raised us with clear values that Hannah had rejected in favor of Wesley's vision of success. Now, stripped of the trappings of wealth, she began reconnecting with the person she had been before money became her measuring stick. 6 months into her job at the school, Hannah approached me with an idea for a financial literacy program for high school students. If I had understood basic investment principles, I might have questioned Wesley's promises, she explained. Maybe we can help other young people avoid similar mistakes. The "we" wasn't lost on me, a tentative olive branch extended after so much conflict. With the remaining funds from my settlement, I established a small foundation supporting causes our parents had valued: education, medical research, and community arts programs. When Hannah asked if she could volunteer with the foundation's initiatives, I recognized it as another step in her personal redemption. The extended family that had been fractured by our inheritance dispute slowly reunited around these positive developments. Thanksgiving dinner at Aunt Patricia's house marked a turning point, with Hannah bringing a homemade apple pie rather than the expensive wines she once favored. As family members shared memories of our parents, I noticed Hannah listening intently, occasionally wiping away tears. After dinner, she pulled me aside to the quiet of Aunt Patricia's sunroom. "I've been trying to find the right words," she began, her voice unsteady. "But there aren't words adequate for how completely I betrayed you and our parents' memory." The apology that followed was raw and genuine, free from the calculated manipulations that had characterized our previous interactions. "I convinced myself I deserved more because I lived a bigger life," she admitted. "But I was measuring the wrong things entirely. Forgiveness didn't come easily or all at once." There were still moments when remembering her coldness during the inheritance dispute would stop me mid-conversation, a sudden chill despite our warming relationship. But watching Hannah's genuine efforts to rebuild her life with integrity created space for healing neither of us had thought possible. James proposed on my birthday, not with an extravagant diamond that would have impressed the old Hannah, but with my grandmother's restored ring that he had secretly retrieved from the estate sale. The simple gesture embodied everything I valued: thoughtfulness over flash, meaning over monetary worth. To my surprise, Hannah threw herself into helping plan a small, meaningful ceremony. "You don't have to do this," I told her as she assembled handmade centerpieces in her apartment. "I know," she replied, focusing on arranging wildflowers in mason jars. "I want to." When I asked Hannah to be my bridesmaid, the tears in her eyes spoke volumes about our journey from estrangement to reconciliation. The wedding itself was everything our parents would have loved: intimate, joyful, centered on relationships rather than appearances. Hannah stood beside me in a simple blue dress, her brief toast capturing our family's journey without directly referencing the painful past. "Our parents taught us that true wealth lies in how we treat each other," she said, raising her glass. Samantha never forgot that lesson, even when I did. I'm learning it again through her example. The most profound moment of healing came 6 months after the wedding. Hannah suggested we visit our parents' graves together on the anniversary of the accident. Standing before the shared headstone, Hannah placed fresh flowers beside the marker. "Do you think they would forgive me?" she asked quietly. "They already did," I replied. "They forgave us before we even made our mistakes." That's what parents do. We stood in silence, two sisters who had traveled a painful road to arrive at a truth our parents had lived: that relationships outlast possessions, that character matters more than wealth, and that forgiveness, while difficult, offers the only path forward from betrayal. The inheritance that had nearly destroyed us ultimately revealed who we truly were. For Hannah, it exposed a vulnerability to materialism that had nearly cost her everything. For me, it tested my commitment to the values our parents had instilled. In losing the money, I had preserved something far more valuable. In gaining it all, Hannah had lost herself before finding her way back. As I watch my sister rebuild her life with newfound wisdom, I often think about what our parents' true legacy was. Not the $12 million that appeared and disappeared so dramatically, but the example they set through decades of quiet integrity. They lived according to their values rather than their bank account, finding joy in purpose and relationships rather than possessions. In the end, that was the inheritance that mattered, the one that sustained me through betrayal and eventually helped reclaim my sister from the hollow pursuit of wealth at any cost. If you've made it to the end of this story, I'd love to know if you've ever experienced a family conflict over money or possessions and how you navigated those challenging waters. Leave a comment below sharing your experience or any insights this story brought up for you. And if you found value in this journey through loss, betrayal, and redemption, please consider subscribing and sharing with others who might be facing similar family challenges. Remember that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the integrity and love we bring to our relationships. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm Caitlin Mitchell, 29, and I'm sitting in my trusty old Honda, staring at my parents' sprawling colonial home. The driveway is lined with luxury cars, my sister Amber's new Range Rover, and what must be her fiancé Bradley's Porsche. My stomach knots as I grip the steering wheel. They'll mock my car, my clothes, my life choices again tonight. Little do they know, I'm worth more than everyone at that dinner table combined. I take a deep breath and step out. Let the performance begin. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, because trust me, appearances can be very deceiving. I park my Honda at the far end of the circular driveway, hoping it won't be too noticeable next to the gleaming luxury vehicles. As I walk toward the house, memories flood back of growing up in this upper-middle-class neighborhood of Westchester County. My parents, Eleanor and Richard Mitchell, weren't always this obsessed with status. Dad started as a financial advisor with modest success, but when he landed several wealthy clients 15 years ago, everything changed. Suddenly, we moved to this bigger house, joined the country club, and appearances became the family currency. My sister Amber, 2 years younger than me, adapted perfectly to our new lifestyle. She was always naturally beautiful, tall, blonde, and graceful, while I took after my grandmother with unruly brown hair and a practical nature. Amber became the golden child, thriving in social situations, knowing exactly what to wear and say. I was the different one, more interested in dismantling my computer to see how it worked than shopping for designer clothes. "Caitlin, why can't you try to fit in more?" Mom would ask, exasperated when I'd show up to country club events in simple dresses, while Amber sparkled in the latest fashion. Despite their concerns about my different interests, my parents did provide us both with excellent education. I attended Cornell, studying business and computer science, while Amber went to NYU for communications. But our paths diverged dramatically after college. Amber pursued a career in public relations, working with luxury brands and building the perfect Instagram life. Meanwhile, I locked myself away coding, building a software solution for supply chain management that began as a side project. I remember trying to explain it to my family over dinner 3 years ago. "So you just type on a computer all day?" Dad had asked, brow furrowed. "It's actually a predictive algorithm that helps companies," I started. "Amber just got hired to handle PR for that famous jewelry designer." Mom interrupted, effectively ending my explanation. What my family never knew was that my computer thing had attracted serious venture capital by then. I'd incorporated my company, Secure Chain Technologies, and was already managing a team of 15 developers. I chose to keep my growing success private for several reasons, partly because I wasn't sure it would last, partly because I didn't want my family's dynamics to change, and partly because I'd grown tired of having to prove my worth to them. While Amber moved into a luxury high-rise apartment in Manhattan that our parents helped furnish, I stayed in my modest two-bedroom in Brooklyn. I drove my reliable Honda even after I could afford any car I wanted. I lived comfortably but simply, investing most of my earnings back into my company and various charities I believed in. Family gatherings became increasingly difficult. Last Christmas, Amber had brought her then-boyfriend, some Wall Street type who didn't last, and spent the entire evening talking about their weekend in Paris. "Caitlin, you should really let me introduce you to some of Bradley's friends," she'd said with that pitying look I'd grown to hate. "They're all doing so well. You need someone who can take care of you." I nearly choked on my wine, considering I'd just closed a round of funding valuing my company at over $300 million. But I just smiled and said, maybe someday. Now, standing at the imposing front door of my parents' house, I take a deep breath. Through the window, I can see Amber gesturing animatedly, a massive diamond glinting on her left hand. Beside her sits a man I assume is Bradley, tall, conventionally handsome, with the confident posture of someone who's never had to doubt his place in the world. I smooth down my simple blue dress, quality material, but nothing flashy, and press the doorbell. Time to play my role again, Caitlin, the underachieving daughter who can't quite get her life together. If only they knew I was flying to Singapore next week to open our Asia-Pacific headquarters. "Caitlin, you're finally here," my mother exclaims as she opens the door, air-kissing both my cheeks. She's wearing a new designer dress, her blonde hair freshly highlighted. Her eyes do a quick assessment of my appearance, and I can see the slight disappointment. Everyone's in the living room. "Come meet Bradley." I follow her through the foyer, past the grand staircase with its gleaming banister, into the formal living room where my father is pouring drinks at the built-in bar. Amber immediately jumps up from her position on the leather sofa. "Kate, meet my fiancé, Bradley Harrington," she announces, emphasizing his last name as if I should recognize it. To be fair, I do. Harrington Capital is a well-established investment firm. Bradley stands and extends his hand. He's taller than I expected, with kind eyes that don't match the stereotype I'd built in my head. "It's great to finally meet you, Caitlin," he says with genuine warmth. "Amber talks about you all the time." "All good things, I hope," I reply with a small smile, wondering what exactly Amber has told him. "Scotch, Caitlin," my father asks, already pouring himself a second glass. "White wine would be great, Dad." Amber immediately flashes her hand in my direction. "Did you see it? 6 carats, cushion cut, platinum band." The diamond on her finger is indeed spectacular, ostentatious, but beautiful. "It's gorgeous, Amber." "Congratulations to you both," I say sincerely. Despite our differences, I do want my sister to be happy. Bradley's family has a summer home in the Hamptons right next to the Fosters. You remember the Fosters, don't you, Caitlin? My mother chimes in. "We met them at the club fundraiser last year." "I don't think Caitlin came to that one, dear," my father says, handing me a glass of wine. "Oh, that's right. You were busy with, what was it again?" "Your computer job." Mom's voice has that particular tone that manages to make any career sound insignificant. "Something like that," I reply vaguely, taking a sip of wine. Bradley turns toward me. "Amber mentioned you work in tech. What exactly do you do?" Before I can answer, Amber jumps in. "Oh, she does something with computers. Nothing as interesting as managing family portfolios like you, honey." She squeezes his arm affectionately. "Actually, I find tech fascinating," Bradley counters. "My firm's been investing heavily in software solutions lately." I'm about to respond when my mother announces dinner is ready. We move to the formal dining room, where the table is set with the good china and crystal glasses. I notice the candles, the fresh flower arrangement, the carefully folded napkins. My mother always did have an eye for presentation. As we take our seats, Bradley and Amber on one side, me on the other, parents at the ends, my father begins discussing their recent home renovations. We'd just finished the master bath. Italian marble, Heated floors, that rainfall shower system I was telling you about, Bradley. Sounds impressive. Bradley responds politely. You should see Caitlin's apartment, Amber interjects with a laugh. It's so quaint. In that gentrifying area of Brooklyn, right, Kate? It suits my needs, I say simply. Speaking of which, my mother begins, serving the salad. Are you still at that same job, Caitlin? The startup thing. Yes, we're actually expanding. Did I tell you Bradley just made partner? Amber interrupts. Youngest in the firm's history. Congratulations, I say to Bradley, who has the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but rewarding. He turns to me again. So, what does your company do exactly? Again, before I can properly answer, my father jumps in. Caitlin, we saw the funniest thing on the way to the club yesterday. A car just like yours. That old Honda, with a bumper literally held on with duct tape. He laughs heartily. I said to your mother, thank goodness Caitlin's car isn't quite that bad yet. My mother smiles indulgently. Richard, stop. But seriously, Caitlin, when are you going to upgrade that car? It must have over 100,000 miles by now. About 150,000 actually, but it runs perfectly, I reply, cutting my salad into smaller pieces than necessary. I could help you look at some options my father offers in what he probably thinks is a generous tone. Maybe we could figure out a good lease for you. Something affordable but a bit more appropriate. My car is fine, Dad. Really? Bradley, perhaps sensing my discomfort, steers the conversation elsewhere. This wine is excellent. Montrachet. I take a sip and nod in agreement. 2015, I think. Good year. Bradley looks at me with slight surprise. You know your wines. Just a hobby, I say with a small shrug. Caitlin went through a phase in college where she thought she might want to be a sommelier, my mother explains, as if discussing a child's passing interest in becoming an astronaut. It's a challenging profession, Bradley comments. Requires a sophisticated palate. Yes, well, thankfully she focused on more practical pursuits, my father says. Though I still don't quite understand what this company of yours actually produces, Caitlin. We develop supply chain management software that... Oh, before I forget, Amber interrupts yet again. We've decided on a June wedding at the Harrington estate. Mother, we need to go dress shopping soon. I'm thinking Vera Wang or maybe Ellie Saab. And just like that, the conversation returns to Amber's world. I notice Bradley glancing at me apologetically, but I've grown used to this dynamic. The meal progresses, my mother serving her signature beef tenderloin with roasted vegetables. When I mention I'll be traveling next week, no one asks where or why. Some of us work for real money, not just to fund backpacking trips, Amber says with a laugh when I decline a second glass of wine, explaining I have an early meeting tomorrow. I bite my tongue, reminding myself that in my company's last valuation, my personal net worth exceeded $2 billion. Not that anyone at this table would believe it. The dinner continues as my mother clears the main course dishes, refusing my offer to help. Just sit, Caitlin. You always put things back in the wrong places anyway. My father refills his and Bradley's scotch glasses. So, Bradley, Amber tells me you just closed that deal with Westmore Industries. Impressive work. They're notoriously difficult to bring on board. Bradley nods modestly. It was a team effort, but yes, we're very pleased with the arrangement. That's the difference between real business and these internet startups, my father says, gesturing toward me with his glass. Tangible results, established relationships, actual profits. I take a slow, deliberate sip of water. My company had been profitable for over 2 years now, a rarity in the tech world where growth often takes precedence over immediate returns. But my father wouldn't know that because he'd never bothered to ask. Speaking of profits, my mother chimes in as she returns with a creme brulee for each of us. Bradley, didn't you just get that beautiful new Porsche I saw in the driveway? Yes, the 911 Turbo. It's a bit indulgent, I admit, Bradley says. Nonsense. You work hard, You deserve to enjoy the fruits of your labor, my father booms. Not everyone understands the value of quality. He gives me a pointed look. Caitlin, maybe Bradley could give you some financial advice sometime. Help you get on track for a more comfortable future. The irony is almost painful. The investment division of Bradley's firm had actually approached me about managing some of my assets just last month, though of course he wouldn't know that. That's very kind, but I'm doing fine, I say quietly. Amber snorts delicately. Fine? Kate, you live in a tiny apartment, drive a car older than some of my shoes, and wear the same 3 outfits to every family function. You could use some help. Not everyone values the same things, Amber. I reply, my voice tight. True, but some things are objectively better, she counters. Like not having to check your bank account before making a purchase. I don't actually. Oh, Caitlin, my mother interrupts, reaching across to pat my hand condescendingly. You know we just want what's best for you. You could be so pretty if you put in a little effort. Maybe a nice haircut, some designer pieces. Mom, I don't need. And it wouldn't hurt to meet some of Bradley's colleagues, she continues as if I hadn't spoken. Successful men who could take care of you. I feel heat rising to my cheeks. I can take care of myself. Of course you can, sweetie, my father says in that patronizing tone I've grown to hate. But wouldn't it be nice not to have to? To have some security? I have security, I insist. A startup is hardly security, Amber scoffs. Those things fold all the time. Bradley, who has been observing this exchange with increasing discomfort, finally speaks up. What's your company called, Caitlin? Maybe I'm familiar with it. Before I can answer, Amber laughs. It's something techy and boring. Nothing you would have heard of, honey. I notice Bradley frowns slightly at Amber's dismissal, but he doesn't challenge her. Anyway, my mother says, clearly wanting to move past this topic, we're thinking of renovating the guest house next. Turn it into a proper pool house with a full kitchen and bar. For entertaining in the summer. That sounds lovely, Amber responds enthusiastically. Perfect for pre-wedding festivities. My father turns to me. So, Caitlin, any trips planned? Besides your business trip. He says business trip, as if it's a euphemism for something less legitimate. Actually, yes. I'll be in Singapore next week then. Singapore. Amber interrupts, her perfectly arched eyebrows rising. What on earth for? Work, I say simply, not wanting to explain that I'm opening our Asia-Pacific headquarters and meeting with potential investors. My mother hums skeptically. Sounds expensive for a small company. It's necessary for our expansion, I explain, trying to keep the irritation from my voice. Well, if you need help with the airfare, my father begins, in what he clearly thinks is a generous offer, I could lend you some miles from my business account. I nearly choke on my dessert. The private jet I've been using for the past year costs more per hour than most people's monthly salary. That's not necessary, Dad. The company covers travel expenses. Must be nice, Amber says with a smirk. My company only pays for business class. But then again, we're an established firm with actual revenue to consider. Bradley looks increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I'm sure Caitlin's company has a solid business model if they're expanding internationally. Oh, Bradley, Amber laughs, patting his arm. You're so sweet to be encouraging. But Kate's always been the dreamer of the family. Remember that pottery phase in high school? She thought she'd open a studio. And there was the photography summer, my mother adds with a chuckle. All those strange close-ups of rust and peeling paint. I was 16, I mutter. The point is, my father continues, some people are built for success in the real world, and others, well, they find their own path. He raises his glass toward Amber and Bradley. To the power couple and their bright future. Everyone raises their glasses except me. I'm fighting back tears of frustration and anger. Come on, Kate, Amber urges. Don't be a poor sport just because you're the poor relation. She laughs at her own joke, and my parents join in. That's when I decide I've had enough. I place my napkin on the table and begin to push back my chair. Caitlin, Don't be so sensitive, my mother scolds. Amber was just joking. Some jokes aren't funny, I say quietly. And that's when Bradley, who has been watching me with an increasingly curious expression, says something that changes everything. Wait, Caitlin Mitchell. Didn't I see your Gulf Stream in St. Bart's last month? The room falls completely silent. The silence that follows Bradley's question is absolute. My fork hovers midway to my mouth, my mother's hand freezes while reaching for her wine glass, my father's perpetual smile falters, and Amber's expression shifts from smugness to confusion. What did you say? Amber finally asks, turning to Bradley. Bradley looks directly at me, his expression difficult to read. I thought I recognized you boarding a private jet in St. Bart's about 3 weeks ago. It was a Gulfstream G650. If I'm not mistaken. All eyes turn to me. I feel a strange mix of emotions, the relief of potentially being discovered, the anxiety of having my carefully constructed separation of worlds collapse, and an undeniable spark of satisfaction at the thought of finally being seen by my family. You must be mistaken, my mother says with a nervous laugh. Caitlin doesn't travel on private jets. Actually, I say slowly. Placing my fork down, I was in St. Bart's last month for the Global Tech Summit. On a private jet? My father asks incredulously. I take a deep breath. For years, I've kept my success separate from my family life. I never lied about my company, I just didn't volunteer information, and they never asked meaningful questions. Part of me wanted to prove I could succeed without their support or validation. Another part feared that once they knew about my wealth, our relationship would become even more superficial than it already was. Yes, I finally admit. On a private jet. Amber laughs, but it sounds forced. Stop joking, Kate. Bradley must have seen someone who looks like you. There's no way you have access to a private jet. It's not about access, Bradley says thoughtfully. The tail number was registered to Secure Chain Technologies. He looks at me with new interest. That's your company, isn't it? I nod slowly. You own a jet? My father asks, his voice a mixture of disbelief and dawning realization. The company does, I clarify. For international business. But you drive that old Honda, my mother sputters. You live in that tiny apartment in Brooklyn. By choice, I say simply. What exactly does your company do? Bradley asks, leaning forward with genuine interest. For once, no one interrupts me as I begin to explain. We developed a blockchain-based supply chain management system that allows companies to track products from raw materials to consumer delivery with unprecedented security and efficiency. We started with pharmaceuticals, ensuring medications weren't counterfeit or compromised in transit, and expanded from there. Bradley's eyes widen. You're that Secure Chain? The one that just signed the contract with the European Union for vaccine distribution tracking. I nod again. But that company is worth. Bradley trails off, apparently doing mental calculations. Our last valuation was $4.7 billion, I say quietly. My mother's wine glass slips from her fingers, spilling red liquid across the white tablecloth. No one moves to clean it up. That's impossible, Amber says, her voice rising. You would have told us if you were some tech millionaire. Billionaire. Actually, Bradley corrects automatically, then looks apologetic. Sorry, that was inappropriate. Billionaire? My father echoes, his face pale. I feel a strange calm settling over me. I never lied to any of you. I told you I founded a tech company focused on supply chain security. I told you we were doing well. No one ever asked for details. But you let us think, you let us believe. My mother can't seem to finish her sentence. You believed what you wanted to believe, I reply. That I was struggling, that my work wasn't valuable, that I needed your help and guidance. It was easier than trying to explain something you'd already decided wasn't worth understanding. Why wouldn't you tell us about this kind of success? My father demands, his shock turning to indignation. We're your family. Are we, though? I ask quietly. Because tonight, like most nights I spend here, I've been mocked, dismissed, and pitted. You've laughed at my car, criticized my apartment, suggested I need financial help, and literally called me the poor relation. Would you have treated me differently if you'd known about my money? Because that's exactly why I didn't tell you. Amber's face has gone from confusion to anger. So you've been lying to us for years, pretending to be some struggling startup girl when really you've been, what, secretly judging us from your moral high ground? I haven't been pretending anything, I counter. I live the way I choose to live. I drive a car that works perfectly well. I live in an apartment that meets my needs. I don't equate expensive things with personal worth. That's your metric, not mine. I always knew you had potential, my father suddenly declares, his businessman persona sliding back into place. I told your mother just last month, Eleanor, Caitlin's smarter than she lets on. Didn't I say that, dear? My mother nods mechanically, still staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. You most certainly did not, I say firmly. You've never believed in my computer thing. You've dismissed my career at every turn. That's not true, he protests. We were just concerned. You weren't concerned, I interrupt. You were embarrassed. Embarrassed that I didn't fit your idea of success. That I wasn't like Amber. Amber stands up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. So this whole time, while I've been feeling sorry for you, trying to include you, offering to help you, you've been laughing at me behind my back? Thinking you're better than me because you have more money. No, Amber, I say, feeling suddenly tired. I've never thought I was better than you. I just wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I own or earn. But you let us pity you, she shouts, tears forming in her eyes. You chose to pity me, I correct her. I never asked for it. Bradley reaches for Amber's hand. Amber, maybe we should. She yanks her hand away. Did you know about this? Is that why you asked about the jet? No, Bradley says calmly. I genuinely thought I recognized Caitlin in St. Bart's. I follow tech startups as part of my job, and Secure Chain has been on our radar for potential investment opportunities. I just didn't make the connection until tonight. So everyone knows about my sister's amazing success except her own family? Amber's voice cracks. How humiliating. And with that, she storms out of the dining room. A moment later, we hear a door slam upstairs. My mother looks torn between following her younger daughter and continuing this revelation with me. Caitlin, I don't understand. Why would you hide this from us? I sigh deeply, because I knew that once you found out about the money, it would be the only thing you'd see. Not my work, not the technology we've created, not the problems we're solving, just the dollars. My father, ever the pragmatist, seems to be recalibrating rapidly. Well, what's done is done. We should talk about your financial planning. Have you considered? Dad, I cut him off. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Nothing has changed about me in the last 5 minutes except your perception of my bank account. Bradley, who has been watching this family drama unfold with remarkable composure, finally speaks. Mr. Mitchell, I think what Caitlin is trying to say is that she values being appreciated for her ideas and character rather than her financial status. Exactly, I say, grateful for his unexpected support. My father looks bewildered, as if Bradley's translation has rendered my point in a language he can finally understand. But success should be celebrated, he insists. We would have been proud. Would you? I ask. Because I told you 3 years ago that I had developed a new algorithm that could revolutionize supply chain security, and you changed the subject to Amber's new PR job. My mother at least has the grace to look embarrassed. We didn't understand what you were talking about, dear. You never tried to, I say quietly. That's the point. An uncomfortable silence falls over the table. Bradley looks at me with what seems like genuine respect, while my parents exchange glances that communicate decades of shared thoughts. I think I should go, I finally say, placing my napkin on the table and standing. Caitlin, please, my mother begins, but I'm already moving toward the door. Thank you for dinner, I say formally. Bradley, it was nice to meet you. Please tell Amber Tell her I'm sorry it came out this way. As I walk out of the dining room, I hear my father's confused voice. But she's the one who should be apologizing, isn't she? And Bradley's quiet response, I'm not so sure about that, sir. I collect my purse from the entryway, step outside into the cool evening air, and for the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe freely in the presence of my family, even if it's because I'm leaving them behind. I sit in my Honda, my deliberately chosen, perfectly functional Honda, with my hands gripping the steering wheel, not yet starting the engine. Through the large bay window of my parents' dining room, I can see them still at the table. My father is gesturing animatedly. My mother appears to be dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, and Bradley sits straight-backed, listening intently. Amber is nowhere to be seen. Part of me wants to drive away and never look back. But another part, perhaps the stronger part, knows that running away would just perpetuate the dysfunction. With a deep sigh, I exit the car and walk back to the house. When I re-enter the dining room, the conversation halts abruptly. Caitlin, my mother says, surprised. We thought you'd left. I was about to, I admit. But I realized we need to finish this conversation. All of us. I look toward the ceiling, indicating Amber's absence. She's locked herself in her old bedroom, my father explains, looking uncomfortable. She won't come out. I'll talk to her, Bradley offers, standing. No, I say firmly. I should be the one to do it. I climb the familiar staircase, passing framed family photos that document our history, my parents' wedding, Amber and me as children, always Amber in front, me slightly behind, Amber's graduation, various family vacations. I notice with a pang that photos of my college graduation are conspicuously absent. I knock softly on Amber's door. Amber? It's me. Can we talk? Go away, comes her muffled response. Please, Amber. 5 minutes. Then if you still want me to leave, I will. After a long pause, I hear movement, and the door opens slightly. Amber's perfect makeup is streaked with tears, her eyes red and puffy. What could you possibly have to say to me, she demands. I take a deep breath. I'm sorry I kept this from you. Not because I owed you my financial information, but because it created a false dynamic between us. She looks at me suspiciously, but opens the door wider, allowing me to enter. Her childhood bedroom remains largely unchanged, cheerleading trophies, photos of high school friends, the pale pink walls our mother let her choose when we moved in. Why? She asks simply, sitting on the edge of her bed. Why would you let us believe you were struggling when you had? Because I needed to know that you valued me regardless of my bank account, I explain, remaining standing. And to be honest, the evidence suggested you didn't. That's not fair, she protests. I've always tried to help you. I've offered to introduce you to successful men, to help with your wardrobe, to fix me, I interrupt. Because you saw me as broken. As less than. You never once asked about my work with genuine interest. You never once considered that I might be successful on my own terms, not yours. Amber looks down at her hands, where her massive engagement ring catches the light. I didn't think your work was important. I know, I say softly. That's the problem. But you could have told me, she insists, looking up again. You're my sister. We're supposed to share important things. When's the last time you shared something important with me, Amber? Something real, not just showing off a new purchase or a luxury vacation. She opens her mouth to respond, then closes it, seemingly at a loss. The truth is, I continue gently, we stopped being real sisters a long time ago. We became caricatures to each other, you the successful, beautiful socialite, and me the struggling, plain sister. Neither image was ever completely true. Amber is quiet for a long moment. So you've really built a billion-dollar company? I nod. It wasn't the plan. I just wanted to solve a problem I saw in pharmaceutical distribution. The valuation came later. And the jet? You actually have a private jet. The company does, I clarify. For international business travel. It's a practical decision, not a luxury. We operate in 37 countries now. But you still drive that old car and live in that small apartment, she says, confusion evident in her voice. Because those things serve my needs, I explain. I don't need a mansion when it's just me. I don't need a flashy car to impress people. I give a lot to charitable foundations. I reinvest in the company, and yes, I have some indulgences. I collect rare first editions. I travel extensively when not working, and I have a small vacation home in Maine where I go to decompress. Maine? Amber wrinkles her nose. Not the Hamptons or Aspen or somewhere, you know. Somewhere status-oriented? I finish for her. That's exactly my point, Amber. We value different things. Neither approach is inherently wrong, but the problem is that you, and Mom and Dad, have always treated my choices as if they were objectively inferior to yours. She looks thoughtful for perhaps the first time in our adult relationship. I never thought about it that way. I know, I say. And I should have been more direct about how your comments made me feel instead of just withdrawing and keeping secrets. That's on me. A knock at the door interrupts us. Everything okay in there? It's Bradley's voice. Amber and I exchange a look. We're talking, Amber calls back. We'll be down in a bit. Take your time, he responds, and we hear his footsteps retreating. He seems nice, I offer. Different from what I expected. A small smile touches Amber's lips. He is. He's actually real. Not like most of the guys I've dated. I'm glad, I say sincerely. Did you really think we wouldn't love you if you weren't rich? Amber asks suddenly, vulnerability showing through her usually perfect facade. The question catches me off guard. I never doubted that you loved me in some fundamental way. But I did doubt and still do. Whether you respected me. Whether any of you saw value in who I am beyond superficial measures of success. Amber is quiet again, perhaps recognizing the truth in my words. We should go back downstairs, I suggest. Mom and Dad are probably climbing the walls with curiosity. Amber nods and stands, smoothing her designer dress. At the door, she pauses. For what it's worth, I always envied your intelligence. The way you could understand things I couldn't even begin to grasp. The admission surprises me. Really? Really, she confirms. I just never knew how to say it without sounding less than. And I envied your social ease, I admit. The way you could walk into any room and immediately belong. A moment of genuine understanding passes between us, perhaps the first in many years. Then Amber straightens her shoulders, puts on a brave smile, and leads the way downstairs, where my parents and Bradley await the next act in our family drama. When Amber and I return to the dining room, the atmosphere is tense. My father has poured himself another scotch, my mother is pretending to rearrange the flower centerpiece, and Bradley stands by the window, looking out at the darkening evening sky. They all turn as we enter, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. Amber takes her seat beside Bradley, who gives her hand a reassuring squeeze. I remain standing, feeling somehow that this conversation requires me to be on my feet. I think we need to clear the air, I begin. All of us. I agree, my father says, setting down his glass with an authoritative thunk. I think the first order of business is why you felt it necessary to deceive your family about your financial situation for years. And just like that, I realize he still doesn't get it. Dad, I didn't deceive anyone. I simply didn't volunteer information that, frankly, none of you ever showed interest in. Of course we were interested in your life, my mother protests. Were you? I challenge gently. When was the last time any of you asked me a substantive question about my work? About what I actually do day to day? About my goals or challenges or achievements? The silence that follows is telling. Let me give you some examples of questions you did ask. I continue. When are you going to get a better car? Why don't you move to a nicer neighborhood? Have you met anyone who could take care of you? Those aren't questions about my life, they're judgments wrapped in interrogative form. My father bristles. That's unfair, Caitlin. We've always supported you. How? I ask simply. Well, we We paid for your education, he sputters. Yes, you did, I acknowledge. And I'm grateful for that. But support isn't just financial, Dad. It's emotional too. It's showing interest. It's respect. We respect you, my mother insists. Really? I raise an eyebrow. Tonight you laughed at my car, pitted my apartment, suggested I needed financial help, and literally called me the poor relation. Does that sound like respect to you? My mother has the grace to look embarrassed. We were just concerned. No, I say firmly. Concern would have been asking if I was happy with my choices. You weren't concerned. You were embarrassed. Embarrassed that I didn't conform to your vision of success. That's not true, my father begins, but Amber, surprisingly, interrupts him. It is true, Dad, she says quietly. We've all done it. I've probably been the worst offender. My parents look at Amber with surprise. She continues, Caitlin and I just talked upstairs, and she made me realize how dismissive I've been. How we all have been. We just wanted what was best for you, my mother says, reaching for my hand across the table. I don't take it. No, Mom. You wanted what you thought was best for me. You never asked what I wanted or valued. And what do you value? Bradley asks, speaking for the first time since Amber and I returned. If it's not the traditional markers of success? I consider his question thoughtfully. Purpose. Problem solving. Making a difference in how critical supplies reach the people who need them. Learning. Growth. Authentic connections. I pause. And yes, I value financial security too. I'm not claiming some moral high ground where money doesn't matter. It does. But it's not the only thing that matters, and it's certainly not the primary metric by which I judge myself or others. My father scoffs slightly. That sounds nice in theory, but in the real world. Dad, I interrupt. I've built a multi-billion-dollar company that operates across 37 countries and employs over 500 people. I think I understand how the real world works. He falls silent, seemingly unable to reconcile the daughter he thought he knew with the successful businesswoman standing before him. I just don't understand why you didn't tell us, my mother says, returning to what seems to be the central issue for them. We're your family. I didn't tell you because I knew exactly what would happen, I explain. Everything would change, but not in the way I wanted. You wouldn't suddenly become interested in my work or ideas. You'd just be interested in my money and the status it confers. And look what's happening right now. We're still not talking about what my company does or why it matters. We're talking about my net worth and why I kept it private. My words hang in the air. Bradley nods slightly, as if confirming some private thought. You have to admit, it's a significant thing to keep from your family, my father argues, but with less conviction than before. Is it? I challenge. Do you tell me the details of your financial portfolio? Does Amber disclose her salary and savings to everyone at this table? Does Mom share the cost of every renovation or luxury purchase? No, because those are personal matters. The only difference is that in my case, the number is larger, which apparently makes you feel entitled to the information. It's not about entitlement, my father protests. Isn't it? I ask. Because from where I'm standing, it feels very much like you're angry not because I kept something private, but because you've been treating me like a failure when I'm actually, by your own metrics, extraordinarily successful. You're angry because you were wrong about me, and that's uncomfortable. My father opens his mouth to object, then closes it again. I've spent years listening to subtle and not so subtle digs about my life choices. I continue. Being dismissed, interrupted, and pitted at every family gathering. Meanwhile, I was building something meaningful, something I'm proud of, not because of its financial value, but because of the problems it solves. And not once did any of you care enough to really ask about it. I asked, Bradley points out quietly. Yes, I acknowledge with a small smile. You did. Tonight. For the first time. An uncomfortable silence falls over the table. My mother dabs at her eyes with a napkin, whether from genuine emotion or a practiced response to conflict. I can't tell. My father stares into his scotch, as if it might contain a rebuttal. Amber looks at her hands, twisting her engagement ring. So, where do we go from here? My mother finally asks. It's a good question. One I've been asking myself since the moment Bradley mentioned my jet. I don't know, I admit. But I think it starts with honesty. Real honesty, not just about bank accounts, but about how we treat each other. About the family dynamic we've created and whether it's serving any of us well. I'd like to know more, Bradley says unexpectedly. About your company, I mean. The blockchain application to supply chain security is fascinating, especially in pharmaceuticals. How did you first identify the problem? For a moment, I'm caught off guard by his genuine interest. Then I find myself explaining how I'd interned at a pharmaceutical distribution company during college and noticed the vulnerability points where counterfeit medications could enter the supply chain. The existing tracking systems were fragmented and easy to manipulate, I explain. I realized blockchain could create an immutable record that would make it nearly impossible to introduce counterfeits undetected. Bradley nods thoughtfully. And you expanded from pharmaceuticals to medical devices first, then critical food supplies, and now we're moving into rare earth minerals and electronic components. I realize that my parents and Amber are watching this exchange with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning comprehension. For perhaps the first time, they're seeing me as a professional, not just a daughter or sister who made strange career choices. I should go, I say finally, feeling emotionally drained. It's been a lot for one evening. Caitlin, please, my mother begins, but I shake my head. I'm not saying goodbye forever, Mom. I'm just saying I need some space to process, and I think you all do too. I gather my purse and stand. Thank you for dinner. And for listening, eventually. As I walk toward the door, Bradley speaks up again. Caitlin, I meant what I said about your company. It's impressive work. If you're ever interested in discussing potential synergies with some of our portfolio companies, I'd be happy to arrange it. I turn back with a small smile. Thank you, Bradley. I'll consider it. With that, I walk out of my parents' house, feeling somehow both heavier and lighter than when I arrived. The truth is finally out, for better or worse. What happens next is up to all of us. 1 week later, I'm sitting in my modest Brooklyn apartment, which, to be fair, is a beautiful pre-war 2-bedroom with original hardwood floors and a small terrace overlooking a tree-lined street. I've never felt the need to apologize for loving this space, despite my family's constant suggestions that I should upgrade to a Manhattan penthouse or a sprawling estate in the suburbs. I'm reviewing quarterly projections for our Asia-Pacific expansion when my doorbell rings. Expecting the delivery I ordered for dinner, I'm surprised to find Bradley Harrington standing in my hallway alone. Bradley, I say, unable to hide my surprise. Is everything okay? Is Amber with you? He shakes his head. No, she's at a dress fitting with your mother. I told them I had a business meeting in the city. I raise an eyebrow, but step aside to let him in. That sounds suspiciously like a white lie. A necessary one, he admits, looking around my apartment with genuine interest rather than the judgment I'm accustomed to from my family. I wanted to talk to you privately. I gesture toward my living room, where floor-to-ceiling bookshelves line one wall, filled with a mix of technical volumes, classic literature, and my prized first editions. Large windows bathe the space in natural light, highlighting the comfortable but quality furniture and the absence of ostentatious displays of wealth. Nice place, Bradley comments, and I can tell he means it. It suits you. Thank you, I reply, genuinely appreciative of his ability to see beyond square footage and zip code. Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee, tea, water. Coffee would be great, thanks. As I prepare 2 cups in my kitchen, Bradley continues to observe my home. You have an impressive book collection, he calls out. Books have always been my weakness, I admit, returning with our coffee. I'd rather spend on a rare first edition than a designer handbag any day. Bradley accepts the cup with a nod of thanks. So, I imagine you're wondering why I'm here. The thought had crossed my mind, I say with a small smile. He takes a sip of coffee before continuing. Things have been tense since last week's dinner. Amber has been cycling between anger, embarrassment, and a weird kind of competitive jealousy. Your parents call multiple times a day, asking questions about your company that they could easily Google. I wince. I'm sorry you've been caught in the middle of this family drama. Don't be, he says firmly. Actually, it's been enlightening. I've learned more about the family I'm marrying into from this one incident than in the previous 6 months of dating Amber. I'm not sure how to respond to that, so I wait for him to continue. The thing is, Bradley says, leaning forward slightly, I admire what you've built. Not just the company, but your approach to success. It's refreshing to meet someone who isn't trying to signal their worth through conspicuous consumption. That's not a perspective I'm used to hearing from my family circle, I admit. I know, he sighs. And I'm starting to realize that Amber and I may have some fundamental differences in how we view wealth and status. I'm not sure I'm the right person to discuss relationship concerns about my sister, I say carefully. Fair enough, he acknowledges. But I'm not here just about that. I wanted to apologize for inadvertently exposing your secret at dinner. It wasn't my place. Actually, I should thank you, I reply after a moment's consideration. It was bound to come out eventually, and at least this way it happened all at once rather than through a slow drip of revelations and denials. Still, it created quite the family earthquake. Some structures need to be shaken to reveal their weaknesses, I say. Maybe it's better in the long run. My phone rings, a video call from our Singapore office. I'm sorry, I need to take this. It's an important client. Of course, Bradley says, gesturing for me to go ahead. I answer the call, speaking with the client about implementation timelines and security protocols. It's a complex conversation requiring my full attention and expertise. When I finish, I realize Bradley has been watching with newfound respect. You're really good at what you do, he comments. The way you explained those technical concepts so clearly, I've sat through hundreds of meetings with tech executives who couldn't articulate their value proposition half as well. Thank you, I say, somewhat embarrassed by his praise. It helps that I built the system from the ground up. Amber doesn't really understand what you do, does she? He asks suddenly. I sigh. She's never tried to. None of them have. That's changing, believe it or not, Bradley says. Your father has been researching blockchain technology obsessively. Your mother asked me if I thought you might be willing to speak at her women's business luncheon next month. They're trying in their way. And Amber? Bradley hesitates. Amber is struggling the most with this shift. She's always defined herself in comparison to you. First as the successful sister compared to your struggling career, and now she's not sure where she stands. I never wanted it to be a competition, I say softly. I know that now, he nods. But family dynamics are complicated. Speaking of which, they want to have another dinner next week. All of us. I feel anxiety rising at the thought. I'm not sure that's a good idea so soon. Probably not, he agrees. But healing has to start somewhere, doesn't it? My doorbell rings again. This time, actually the dinner delivery I was expecting. After I pay the delivery person and set the food aside, Bradley stands to leave. I should get back before they wonder where I've been. At the door, he pauses. You know, when I first heard about Amber's computer nerd sister, I wasn't expecting someone who would challenge my perception of success and authenticity. It's been eye-opening. In a good way, I hope? Definitely, he confirms. And for what it's worth, I think your family will come around eventually. They just need time to adjust their entire worldview. He smiles wryly. That's asking a lot, I say with a small laugh. True growth usually is, he replies. But I think you've started something important, not just with your company, but with your family. Sometimes the hardest algorithms to debug are the ones running our relationships. After Bradley leaves, I sit on my terrace with my coffee, watching the Brooklyn sunset. My phone buzzes with a text from my mother, thinking of you, sweetheart. Proud of all you've accomplished. Would love to hear more when you're ready. It's a small step, awkward and probably prompted by Bradley's influence, but it's something. For the first time in years, I feel like my family might eventually see me, the real me, not the version of me they constructed in their minds. The next morning, I board my company's jet for a trip to our London office. As we reach cruising altitude, I look out the window at the patchwork of cities and countryside below, feeling a sense of perspective that extends beyond the physical landscape. Success isn't measured by the car you drive or the address on your mail. It's not about impressing others or conforming to their expectations. True success comes from living authentically, pursuing work that matters to you, and maintaining the courage to be yourself even when it's easier to play the role others have assigned you. As my jet crosses the Atlantic, I realize I'm finally free from the need for my family's validation. Whatever happens with our relationship going forward, whether we find a new equilibrium or maintain a respectful distance, I know my worth isn't determined by their perception of me. And perhaps that's the most valuable asset I've acquired on this journey. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between being authentic and meeting others' expectations? Drop a comment below to share your experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your own path to success. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need a reminder that their worth isn't determined by other people's metrics. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the most important validation is the one you give yourself.
I'm Abigail Turner, 32 years old, and I'm standing outside the gleaming Westbrook Plaza Hotel, clutching an invitation to my sister Julia's corporate holiday party. My stomach knots as I check my simple navy dress. We've barely spoken in years, yet here I am. When I finally enter, Julia's eyes meet mine for a split second before darting away, barely acknowledging my presence. She's always been competitive, but tonight feels different. I watch as she anxiously glances at the empty seat marked for her CEO. Something tells me this reunion is about to become unforgettable. If you're enjoying this story already, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button as I reveal what happened next at this corporate disaster. The December air bit at my cheeks as I stood outside the hotel, memories flooding back. Julia and I weren't always strangers. We shared a bedroom for 16 years in our modest home in Milwaukee. But even then, there was always this undercurrent of competition that defined our relationship. I adjusted my simple gold necklace, a stark contrast to the statement jewelry I knew would be adorning necks inside. My company, Access Tech Solutions, had grown from a tiny startup I launched in my garage to a respected player in the adaptive technology industry. We created software and hardware solutions for people with disabilities, focusing on making technology accessible to everyone. But looking at me in my sensible shoes and modest car, most people would never guess. That was by design. I believed in the work, not the trappings of success. Julia, however, had always been the opposite. "Abby, you came?" My mother's voice rang in my ear through my phone. "Did you find the place okay?" "Yes, Mom. I'm just taking a minute before going in," I replied, watching expensively dressed people streaming through the hotel's revolving doors. "Your sister really wants you there, honey. This is a big night for her." I bit back a sigh. Mom always saw what she wanted to see in our relationship. The family dinner last month had been her idea, a not-so-subtle intervention to repair the sisterly bond that had frayed to nearly nothing. Julia had reluctantly mentioned this holiday party, and Mom had practically RSVP'd for me on the spot. "I know, Mom. I'm going in now. Remember, she's up for that big promotion. Having family support means a lot." Family support. As if Julia had been supportive when I mortgaged everything I owned to start Access Tech, or when I worked 18-hour days for 3 years straight to get it off the ground. But I pushed those thoughts away. Tonight wasn't about our past. It was about trying to find a way forward. I handed my coat to the attendant and stepped into the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over circular tables draped in white linen. A string quartet played softly in one corner. Corporate logos for Pinnacle Innovations. Julia's employer adorned strategic locations throughout the space. I spotted Julia immediately. She always did know how to command attention in a room. Her emerald dress complemented her auburn hair, which was swept into an elegant updo. She stood among a circle of colleagues, champagne flute in hand, laughing at something someone had said. I took a deep breath and approached. Julia's smile faltered when she saw me. Just for a millisecond, but I caught it. "You made it," she said, her tone revealing neither pleasure nor displeasure. "Everyone, this is my sister. Not my sister Abigail, or my sister who runs her own company. Just my sister, as if I were an extension of her lacking identity of my own. "Nice to meet you all," I said, smiling warmly at the circle of curious faces. "I'm Abigail. Abby works with computers too," Julia added with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Different side of the industry than us." One man in an expensive suit extended his hand. "Thomas Wells, marketing director. What firm are you with?" Before I could answer, Julia cut in. "Oh, Abby's not with a firm. She does her own thing. Very small scale." She turned to me. "Drink? They have that sweet wine you like." I hadn't mentioned wine preferences to Julia in at least 5 years. "I'll get something from the bar, thanks," I said, needing a moment to regroup. As I walked away, I heard Julia smoothly transition the conversation to the new Pinnacle project she was spearheading. Same old Julia, making sure the spotlight never strayed too far from her. The bartender handed me a sparkling water, and I took a moment to observe the room. Men and women in designer clothes chatted in groups, their laughter occasionally rising above the music. I recognized the easy confidence of people accustomed to moving in these circles. While I had achieved success in my own right, this world of corporate politics and posturing had never been my natural habitat. My phone buzzed with a text from my lead developer, Zoe. "New accessibility engine testing complete. Results amazing. Call when you can." Work news normally would have thrilled me, but tonight it just highlighted the vast differences between Julia's world and mine. Her gold-plated corporate ladder climbing versus my mission-driven enterprise. I tucked my phone away, determined to give this evening a fair chance. "You must be Julia's sister." A woman with a Pinnacle name badge appeared beside me. "I'm Meredith from HR. Abigail, nice to meet you." "Julia talks about you sometimes," Meredith said, though her tone suggested those talks weren't entirely complimentary. "All good things, I hope," I replied with a practiced smile. Meredith's polite laugh told me everything I needed to know. "It's unusual for employees to bring family to these events, usually just spouses. Julia and I are trying to spend more time together." I explained, not mentioning our mother's persistent orchestration. "That's sweet. Family is so important," Meredith said, though her eyes were already scanning the room for more advantageous conversation partners. "Excuse me, I see someone I need to speak with." And just like that, I was alone again, sipping sparkling water at my sister's corporate party, wondering how long I needed to stay before making a polite exit. I glanced at Julia, now holding court with a larger group, periodically checking the entrance as if waiting for someone important to arrive. The night was young, but I already felt the familiar weight of being Julia's less interesting, less important sister settling back onto my shoulders. I straightened my posture and reminded myself that I had nothing to prove to these people, even if Julia seemed determined to prove something to them about me. "So, what exactly do you do again?" asked a woman in a sleek black dress, swirling her martini as she gave my outfit a once-over. I'd been attempting to blend into the background near a large potted plant when Julia had steered this group of her colleagues in my direction. "I run a technology company focused on accessibility solutions," I answered, trying to keep it simple. Julia laughed a little too loudly. "Abby means she helps fix computer problems for people who aren't tech-savvy, like a help desk but freelance. She turned to me with a tight smile. Isn't that right? I felt my cheeks warm. Actually, Access Tech develops adaptive software and hardware for people with disabilities. We just completed a major project that allows visually impaired users to navigate complex websites with voice commands. A man in the group raised his eyebrows with what seemed like genuine interest. That sounds fascinating. Is there a growing market for that kind of specialized technology? Julia stepped slightly in front of me, physically inserting herself between me and her colleague. Speaking of growing markets, Harold, did you see the projections for the Asian expansion? I worked on those numbers all weekend. The conversation was efficiently redirected, and I was once again relegated to the periphery. I caught snippets of corporate jargon as Julia dominated the discussion, occasionally throwing glances my way as if to make sure I was witnessing her importance. Julia, your sister was about to tell us about her business, Harold said, attempting to circle back. Oh, it's not really a business, Julia said with a dismissive laugh. It's more of a passion project, isn't it, Abby? Like when we were kids and you'd take apart Dad's radio to see how it worked. Actually, we employ 37 people now, I said quietly. Julia's eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite identify. Annoyance? Surprise. She quickly recovered. 37. Wow, when did that happen? Last I heard it was just you and a couple of college interns. We've grown quite a bit in the past few years, I replied, aware that everyone was watching our exchange with interest. Well, good for you, Julia said in a tone that suggested she was humoring a child. But Harold, you simply must hear about the presentation I gave to the executive committee last week. Frederick himself said it was refreshingly innovative. Frederick? That must be the CEO she kept anxiously looking for. I considered confronting her right then, calling out her dismissive behavior. But a memory flashed in my mind, our 8th grade science fair. I'd spent weeks building a working model of a solar-powered water filtration system. Julia had thrown together a volcano with baking soda and vinegar the night before. When the judges came around, she'd stepped in front of my display, claiming loudly that the really cool explosion was coming from her project. She got more attention, but I got the blue ribbon. Some patterns never changed. I excused myself to visit the restroom, needing a moment alone. As I walked away, I heard Julia loudly ask, "Did I mention I'm being considered for the director position, youngest in company history?" The bathroom was mercifully empty. I leaned against the marble countertop, studying my reflection in the mirror. My blonde hair was pulled back in a simple updo, my makeup minimal. Nothing like Julia's glamorous appearance. But then I'd never wanted to be Julia. I'd only wanted her respect, or at the very least her honesty. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Zoe. Forbes wants to interview you about the patent approval. Call ASAP. The patent. We'd been waiting months for that approval. It was a significant milestone for Access Tech 1 that would likely lead to major new contracts. For a moment, I was tempted to return to the party and share the news, to see the look on Julia's face when she realized her help desk sister had just secured a game-changing patent. But what would that accomplish? Would it fix years of competitive undermining? Would it suddenly make Julia see me as an equal rather than an afterthought? No. This wasn't about proving myself to Julia or her colleagues. I'd already proven myself in ways that mattered to me. I tucked my phone away without responding and returned to the party, determined to get through the evening with Grace intact. As I re-entered the ballroom, I noticed Julia deep in conversation with a stern-looking woman who appeared to be a senior executive. Julia's body language was deferential, eager to please. The woman nodded curtly before walking away, and Julia's shoulders momentarily sagged with what looked like relief. "Everything okay?" I asked as I approached. Julia startled, then quickly composed herself. "Fine." That was Catherine, VP of Strategic Development. She says the CEO is definitely coming tonight. Her eyes darted to the entrance again. He rarely attends these events. Everyone's on edge. Including you? I asked gently. Don't be ridiculous, she snapped. I have nothing to be nervous about. My performance reviews have been stellar. A server passed with a tray of champagne, and Julia snatched a glass, downing half of it in one go. You should probably find somewhere to sit. The speeches will be starting soon. I felt a pang of sympathy for my sister. Despite her behavior, I could see the pressure she was under. Julia, I could leave if my being here is making things more stressful for you. For a brief moment, something like vulnerability crossed her features, but it was quickly replaced by her professional mask. Don't be silly. Stay. Just try not to, talk too much about your little business. These people are focused on enterprise-level solutions. And just like that, any sympathy I felt evaporated. I nodded stiffly and moved toward an empty table near the back of the room, wondering if I could slip out after the speeches without anyone noticing. I found myself wedged between a man who introduced himself as procurement, you wouldn't understand it, and a woman who hadn't looked up from her phone since I sat down. The evening had progressed from uncomfortable to unbearable as Julia's behavior became increasingly obvious. Oh, Abby still drives that old Honda, she announced loudly to a group as I passed by the bar. She's very frugal. Aren't you, Abby? My old Honda was a 3-year-old hybrid. Julia leased a new luxury car every 2 years. Later, when someone asked about my company, it's the cutest little operation. She works out of that converted garage space, right, Abby? So startup chic. Our converted garage space was actually 15,000 square feet of office space in downtown Milwaukee, but Julia had never bothered to visit. Each comment built upon the last, creating a caricature of me as Julia's quaint, somewhat backward sister who was dabbling in business while Julia conquered the corporate world. I kept my responses brief and pleasant, not wanting to create a scene. But inside each dismissive remark stung. What exactly do you do at that little computer repair shop? Julia asked loudly as I was speaking with an IT director who had shown genuine interest in accessible technology. It's not a repair shop, Julia, I corrected quietly. As I was explaining, we develop adaptive technologies that make digital tools accessible to people with disabilities. We've recently expanded into artificial intelligence applications that can predict user needs based on previous interactions. The IT director leaned forward. That's fascinating. Are you working with machine learning models for that prediction engine? Yes. We've developed a proprietary algorithm that can distinguish between intentional and accidental input, which is particularly useful for users with motor control challenges. I began. Oh, Abby loves getting into the technical weeds, Julia interrupted with a laugh. But Michael, you simply must tell her about Pinnacle's acquisition plans. Abby's always looking for inspiration for her little venture. Michael looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. Well, I'm not sure how much I can share about that publicly. Of course, Julia said with a conspiratorial wink. We're all family here. Speaking of which, Abby, what on earth possessed you to wear those shoes to a formal event? I glanced down at my navy blue pumps, perfectly appropriate if not cutting-edge fashion. These are fine, Julia, if you say so. I keep telling her she needs to upgrade her wardrobe if she wants to be taken seriously in business meetings, but she insists comfort is more important than appearance. Julia was speaking to Michael, but looking at me with a tight smile. Before I could respond, someone bumped into me from behind, splashing red wine down the side of my dress. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. It was Julia's assistant, Diane, looking mortified, but not entirely convincing. It's fine, I said, grabbing a napkin from the table. Just an accident. Diane, would you show my sister to the restroom and maybe find her a place to wait while that dries? Somewhere out of the way. The CEO will be arriving soon, and we want to make a good impression. Julia's tone made it clear that my wine-stained dress did not constitute a good impression. Of course, Ms. Taylor. Diane gestured for me to follow her. It's really fine, I protested. I can manage. I insist, Julia said firmly. We can't have you walking around like that when Frederick arrives. As Diane led me away, I heard Julia loudly explaining to those nearby, my sister, so clumsy since we were kids. Remember when she knocked over the entire display at my college graduation ceremony? Some things never change. I had never attended Julia's college graduation. Our father had been ill, and I had stayed home to care for him while Mom and Julia went to the ceremony. It was a completely fabricated story designed to diminish me further in front of her colleagues. In the bathroom, I did my best to blot the wine from my dress. The stain wasn't as bad as it initially seemed, but it was still visible. Ms. Taylor suggested you might want to wait in the lobby until the speeches are over. Diane said, not quite meeting my eyes. The CEO is very particular about these events. I'm sure he is, I replied, but I'll be rejoining the party. My sister was kind enough to invite me after all. Diane looked uncomfortable. She was very specific about you waiting elsewhere. Was she? I met Diane's eyes in the mirror. And do you always do exactly what Julia tells you to? A flash of something that might have been respect crossed Diane's face. Not always, she admitted, but often enough to keep my job. I softened. I understand. But I'm not going to hide in the lobby because of a small wine stain. I'll take responsibility if your CEO is offended by my appearance. Diane nodded and left me alone in the bathroom. I took a deep breath, remembering a similar incident from our childhood. I was 12, Julia 14. I had been selected for a regional science competition, and Julia had accidentally spilled orange juice all over my presentation board the morning of the event. I had stayed up all night remaking it while she slept soundly. The next day I took second place. Julia had never forgiven me for not failing. I straightened my shoulders and returned to the ballroom, determined not to let history repeat itself. I wouldn't be hidden away, or diminished wine stain, or no wine stain. As I re-entered the room, I heard Julia's voice amplified by a microphone. She was standing at the front of the room, glass raised in what appeared to be a toast. Her eyes found mine as I slipped in at the back, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes spread across her face. And speaking of special guests, she continued, I'd like to acknowledge my sister who made a rare appearance outside her comfort zone tonight. All eyes turned to me, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. This wasn't going to be good. There she is, my +1 mistake! Julia's voice rang out through the speakers, followed by a ripple of laughter from the crowd. I froze near the back wall, acutely aware of every eye in the room on me. Come on up here, Abby. Don't be shy. I remained where I was, my feet seemingly glued to the floor. Julia's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Always the wallflower, my little sister, she continued. Some of you have had the pleasure of meeting Abigail tonight. For those who haven't, she runs a charming little hobby business out of a garage. More laughter, though I noticed a few uncomfortable glances exchanged among the crowd. She's always been the family tinkerer. Remember that laptop you tried to build from spare parts, Abby, the one that caught fire during the family Christmas? Julia was on a roll now, encouraged by the audience reaction. Firefighters are not the traditional holiday guests, but Abby always did like to stand out. That incident had happened, but it was Julia who had spilled eggnog on the circuit board after I told her not to bring drinks near my workstation. I had been 17, building a custom computer to donate to a local community center. Of course we all have to start somewhere, Julia continued in a faux generous tone. I began in the Pinnacle mailroom, if you can believe it. Now look at me. She gestured to herself grandly. While some of us are content with small dreams and smaller achievements, others reach for the stars. The implication was clear. I was small, insignificant, underachieving. Julia was the success story. But we can't all be corporate climbers, can we? Some of us have to stay grounded, providing those little services that make other people's successes possible. So here's to my sister who's always been, well, exactly who she is. Julia raised her glass higher, and the crowd followed suit, many looking uncertain about what exactly they were toasting. I felt a burning humiliation spread from my chest to my face. Years of competitive jabs had culminated in this public takedown, all to make Julia look superior in front of her colleagues and bosses. I could have walked out. I could have grabbed the microphone and set the record straight. I could have listed Access Tech's achievements, the lives we'd changed, the millions in revenue we generated. But something held me back. Some part of me recognized that Julia's behavior came from a place of deep insecurity, and publicly shaming her would only deepen the rift between us. So I smiled, a tight, controlled smile that took every ounce of my self-restraint, but a smile nonetheless. And I gave a small acknowledging wave to the crowd. Julia's expression flickered with what might have been disappointment. Had she been hoping for a scene, for me to storm out or break down in tears? Either reaction would have reinforced her narrative of me as emotional and unprofessional. And now, Julia continued, recovering quickly, we await the arrival of our esteemed CEO, Frederick Spencer, who I'm told will be joining us momentarily. As the team lead on the Richardson account, I've had the privilege of working closely with Frederick on our latest acquisition strategy. She was back in her element now, name-dropping and self-promoting. I stood frozen in place, the sting of her public ridicule still fresh, wondering how many more minutes I needed to endure before I could make a dignified exit. Just then, a murmur rippled through the crowd. The main doors had opened and a group of people in expensive suits entered. The energy in the room shifted immediately, conversations hushing as attention turned to the newcomers. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced a woman who had taken the microphone from Julia, "please welcome our CEO, Frederick Spencer, and the executive leadership team." Applause filled the room as a tall man with silver hair at his temples strode in, flanked by several serious-looking executives. Julia's face lit up with a practiced smile as she stepped forward, clearly eager to be among the first to greet him. Frederick Spencer scanned the room with the calculated gaze of someone used to being the most important person present. And then, unexpectedly, his eyes landed on me standing quietly at the back of the room with my wine-stained dress. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Frederick Spencer stopped abruptly. The executives with him nearly collided with one another at his sudden halt. His expression transformed from polite corporate neutrality to genuine surprise, and then astonishingly to what appeared to be respect. "Abigail Turner," he called out, his voice carrying across the now silent room. I gave a small nod, aware that every person in the ballroom had turned to stare at me, including Julia, whose smile had frozen on her face. And then Frederick Spencer, CEO of Pinnacle Innovations, did something that no one in that room expected. He walked directly toward me, bypassing Julia and all the other Pinnacle employees who had been vying for his attention. When he reached me, he extended his hand, and with a slight bow of his head said, "Good evening, ma'am. This is an unexpected honor." The room fell into a shocked silence so complete you could have heard a champagne bubble pop. Frederick Spencer, the notoriously difficult-to-impress CEO of Pinnacle Innovations, was standing in front of me with genuine respect in his eyes, while Julia remained frozen at the microphone, her mouth slightly open. "Mr. Spencer," I replied, shaking his hand. "It's nice to meet you in person at last." "The pleasure is entirely mine," he said, his voice carrying in the quiet room. "I've been following your work in adaptive technology for years. Your recent breakthrough with the neural interface for mobility-impaired users is nothing short of revolutionary." From the corner of my eye, I could see Julia's face cycling through expressions, confusion, disbelief, and then the dawning horror of realization. "Everyone," Frederick announced, turning to address the room while keeping a respectful distance from me. "For those who don't know, we are in the presence of one of the most innovative minds in accessible technology, Abigail Turner, founder and CEO of Access Tech Solutions." Murmurs spread through the crowd. I could see Julia's colleagues exchanging glances, some looking at their phones, presumably searching for information about me and my company. In fact, Frederick continued, Pinnacle has just finalized a partnership agreement with Access Tech that will integrate their accessibility software into all our future products. This collaboration represents a $20 million investment from Pinnacle, our largest ever in the accessibility space. $20 million. The deal we'd been negotiating for months had gone through. I had been planning to tell my team tomorrow, but apparently the news had reached Pinnacle's upper management first. Julia's champagne glass was still raised in her frozen hand, the remnants of her mocking toast now a tableau of irony. Her eyes met mine across the room, wide with shock. Ms. Turner's company has grown from a startup to an industry leader in just 6 years, Frederick was saying to the rapt audience. Their patented adaptive technologies are being integrated into products used by millions of people worldwide. We're not just talking about a successful small business. We're talking about a company that's changing how people with disabilities interact with technology. One by one, the executives who had entered with Frederick approached me, introducing themselves and expressing admiration for Access Tech's innovations. Catherine, the VP who had spoken with Julia earlier, was particularly enthusiastic. Your predictive text algorithm for users with cognitive challenges is brilliant, she said. My nephew has dyslexia and uses your software. It's changed his academic experience completely. Throughout these interactions, I maintained my composure, thanking everyone for their kind words, while trying not to draw attention to Julia's earlier mischaracterization of my work. But the damage had been done. Everyone in that room now understood that the hobby business Julia had mocked was actually a multi-million-dollar enterprise worthy of Pinnacle's significant investment. Thomas Wells, the marketing director I'd met earlier, approached with a chagrined expression. I apologize for not recognizing your name earlier, Ms. Turner. Your reputation precedes you in the industry. No apology necessary, I assured him. I don't tend to advertise my position. Unlike some, he murmured with a pointed glance toward Julia, who had finally lowered her champagne glass and was attempting to regain her composure. I watched as Julia made her way through the crowd, moving toward our little group with a determined smile fixed on her face. When she reached us, she slipped her arm through mine in a gesture of sudden sisterly affection. Frederick, I see you've met my brilliant sister, she said, her voice overly bright. I was just telling everyone about her amazing company. Frederick raised an eyebrow. Yes, I caught the end of your introduction. Quite the family talent you two share. Julia's grip on my arm tightened almost painfully. Abby and I have always been close. I've supported her work from the beginning. I could have contradicted her, could have mentioned her years of dismissing my company as a hobby, but what would be the point? Everyone in the room had witnessed her mockery, followed by the CEO's respect for my work. The contrast spoke volumes. Ms. Turner, Frederick continued, addressing me rather than Julia. We'd be honored if you would consider leading a panel at our technology conference next month. Your insights on accessible design would be invaluable to our development team. I'd be happy to, I replied. Wonderful, Frederick smiled. My assistant will contact you directly to arrange the details. Julia's boss, a serious woman I'd noticed watching our exchange with interest, approached our group. Julia, a word, she said, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request. As Julia reluctantly detached herself from my arm and followed her boss to a quiet corner, I found myself engaged in meaningful conversations about accessibility in technology. For the first time that evening, I was being seen for who I actually was, not who Julia had portrayed me to be. Your vision for technology that adapts to the user, rather than forcing the user to adapt to technology, is exactly the direction Pinnacle needs to move in, said a software engineer named Michael. Would you be open to consulting with our development team on our new interface design? Of course, I replied. Access Tech is always looking for opportunities to expand our impact. As the evening progressed, I noticed a steady stream of people approaching me with business cards and questions about Access Tech. Meanwhile, Julia stood with her boss nodding repeatedly, her expression tense. When her boss finally walked away, Julia remained where she was, seemingly unsure of her next move. I excused myself from my conversation and approached her. It seemed cruel to leave her stranded in her moment of professional embarrassment regardless of her treatment of me. "Julia," I said quietly. She turned to me, her eyes flashing with a mixture of emotions. "Congratulations," she said, her voice tight. "You've managed to completely humiliate me in front of my entire company. Are you happy now?" I blinked, taken aback by her accusation. "Humiliate you, Julia? I didn't do anything." "Exactly," she hissed, keeping her voice low but intense. "You sat there and let me make a fool of myself. You knew about the Pinnacle deal. You knew the CEO would recognize you. Why didn't you say something?" I stared at her, incredulous. "When was I supposed to tell you, Julia, between you introducing me as your unemployed sister or mocking my hobby business? You never once asked me a genuine question about my work or my life. You were too busy creating a narrative that made you look superior." Julia's face flushed. "That's not fair. I was just having a little fun with the toasts. It's what we do at these events. Publicly humiliating family members is a corporate tradition. I must have missed that chapter in business school." For a moment, Julia looked like she might argue further, but then her shoulders sagged slightly. "My boss just told me the Richardson account is being reassigned. Apparently, someone with more diplomacy and professional judgment would be better suited to lead a major client relationship." I felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you—" She looked at me skeptically. "Yes, Julia, I am. Despite what you might think, I've never wanted to see you fail. I've only wanted you to see me clearly, to acknowledge my work with the same respect I've always given yours." Julia glanced around the room where several people were watching our interaction with undisguised interest. "I should go mingle. Damage control." She started to move away, then paused. "Your company really closed a $20 million deal with Pinnacle." I nodded. "And you never thought to mention that when I invited you to a Pinnacle event." "You didn't invite me, Julia. Mom did. And no, I didn't think to mention it because in the 6 years I've been building Access Tech, you've never once shown genuine interest in what I do." Julia had no response to that. With a tight nod, she walked away, immediately approaching a group of executives with her professional smile firmly in place. I decided it was time for me to leave. I'd experienced enough emotional whiplash for one evening. As I collected my coat from the attendant, Frederick Spencer approached again. "Leaving so soon, Ms. Turner? The night is young." "It's been quite an evening," I replied diplomatically. "I have an early meeting tomorrow." Frederick nodded understandingly. "Of course. Before you go, I wanted to personally thank you for the work you're doing. My daughter uses a screen reader due to her visual impairment, and your software has made a tremendous difference in her ability to work independently." I hadn't known about his daughter. Suddenly, his interest in Access Tech took on a more personal dimension. "I'm very glad to hear that," I said sincerely. "That's exactly why we do what we do." "I look forward to our company's collaboration," he said, shaking my hand again. "And I hope to see more of you at future Pinnacle events, perhaps under more straightforward circumstances." His knowing look told me he had understood exactly what had transpired earlier with Julia's toast. I smiled appreciatively and made my exit, stepping into the cool night air with a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite sort through. Relief vindication, sadness for my sister, hope for our new business partnership, and beneath it all, a lingering question about whether Julia and I would ever find our way to a genuine relationship. As my car pulled away from the hotel, my phone lit up with a text. It was from Julia. "We need to talk." I sighed deeply. Yes, we certainly did. 3 days passed before I heard from Julia again. The text message saying, "We need to talk. hung unanswered between us, a digital representation of our complicated relationship. I had decided to let her make the next move to reach out when she was ready. In the meantime, I returned to Milwaukee and immersed myself in work. The Pinnacle deal was now public knowledge, and our office was buzzing with excitement. $20 million meant we could accelerate several research projects and hire additional staff. It was a game changer for Access Tech, and I should have been completely focused on the opportunities ahead. Instead, I found myself distracted by thoughts of Julia replaying our childhood moments alongside the events of the holiday party. Had I missed opportunities to bridge the gap between us? Had I contributed to the competitive dynamic by withdrawing rather than confronting her behavior directly? Earth to Abigail. Zoe waved a hand in front of my face during our morning meeting. You were miles away. Everything okay? Just thinking about the implementation timeline for the Pinnacle integration. I lied, shuffling the papers in front of me. Zoe gave me a skeptical look but didn't press the issue. Well, as I was saying, the Forbes interview is scheduled for Thursday. They want to focus on the patent and the Pinnacle partnership. Thanks, Zoe. Let's prep for that tomorrow. After the meeting, I retreated to my office, a modest space with large windows overlooking downtown Milwaukee. Unlike the corner offices of corporate executives, my workspace prioritized function over status. Prototypes of our latest adaptive devices lined one wall, while user feedback formed a collage on another. This was where I felt most at home, surrounded by the tangible evidence of Access Tech's mission. My phone rang, displaying an unfamiliar number with a New York area code. Abigail Turner, I answered. Ms. Turner, this is Catherine Simmons from Pinnacle Innovations. The voice belonged to the VP who had spoken with Julia at the party. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, Ms. Simmons. What can I do for you? First, please call me Catherine. After all, we're partners now, she said with a warmth that surprised me. I wanted to personally follow up on our conversation at the holiday party. Your insights on accessible design have sparked quite a discussion among our development team. We chatted for several minutes about potential collaboration opportunities beyond the formal partnership agreement. As the conversation wound down, Catherine's tone shifted slightly. On a more personal note, I wanted to apologize for what happened at the party. Your sister's presentation of your work was, well, it wasn't accurate or professional. I felt a surge of protectiveness toward Julia despite everything. Family dynamics can be complicated, I said diplomatically. Indeed, Catherine agreed. Still, I want you to know that Julia's behavior doesn't reflect Pinnacle's values of respect and integrity. We've had a discussion with her about it. I winced imagining Julia's humiliation at being reprimanded because of me. I appreciate your concern, but I hope this won't negatively impact Julia's position at Pinnacle. She's very talented. She is, Catherine acknowledged. And no, her job isn't in jeopardy, but this incident has given us insight into areas where she needs professional development, particularly around team dynamics and collaborative leadership. After we said our goodbyes, I sat staring at my phone, wondering if I should reach out to Julia. Before I could decide, an email notification appeared on my screen. From Julia. The subject line read simply, I'm sorry. I clicked it open with trepidation. Abby, I don't know how to begin this email. I'm sorry seems inadequate for what happened at the holiday party, but it's the truth. I am sorry. My boss suggested I take some time to reflect on my professional conduct, which is corporate speak for, you really messed up. She's right. I did mess up. Not just professionally, but personally. As your sister. I told myself I was just having fun with the toast, but that's not true. I deliberately tried to diminish you and your achievements because I felt threatened. I've always felt threatened by you, Abby. You've always seemed to succeed so effortlessly at the things that matter, while I've had to fight for every inch of recognition. That's not an excuse. It's just context for a pattern of behavior I'm only now recognizing. I'd like to meet and talk in person if you're willing. I'll be in Milwaukee next weekend for a client meeting. Perhaps we could have dinner. Julia. I read the email 3 times, searching for the typical Julia deflections or subtle jabs, but there weren't any. It seemed genuine if cautious. I replied with a simple acceptance of her dinner invitation, suggesting a quiet restaurant near my office. Then I turned my attention back to work, trying not to get my hopes up about a potential breakthrough in our relationship. The weekend arrived quickly. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, a habit from years of business meetings. To my surprise, Julia was already there, seated at a corner table away from the main dining area. She looked different somehow. Less polished, more authentic. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. She stood when she saw me, an uncertain smile on her face. "Abby," she said awkwardly, extending her hand before switching to a brief hug. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," I replied, taking my seat across from her. "How was your client meeting?" "Productive," she said. "But that's not why I'm here. I owe you a real apology, Abby. Face to face." I nodded, giving her space to continue. "What I did at the holiday party was inexcusable," she began. "I deliberately misrepresented you and your work to make myself look better. It was petty, unprofessional, and cruel." "Yes, it was," I agreed quietly. Julia looked slightly taken aback by my direct agreement, but continued. "After you left, Frederick Spencer asked me how long I'd known about the Pinnacle partnership with Access Tech. When I admitted I hadn't known about it at all, he seemed genuinely confused. He assumed, since you're my sister, that I must have been instrumental in facilitating the connection." She took a sip of water, her hand trembling slightly. "Do you know how that felt? To have the CEO of my company assume I would be aware of and involved in a $20 million deal with my own sister's company, and to have to admit that I knew so little about your work that I'd been publicly mocking it minutes earlier. I can imagine it was difficult," I said, feeling a mix of sympathy and vindication. "Difficult doesn't begin to cover it," Julia said with a hollow laugh. "But it also made me realize something important. The problem isn't that you're somehow trying to outshine me. The problem is that I've been so focused on competition that I've completely missed who you actually are and what you've accomplished." Her words hung between us, a rare moment of self-awareness from my usually defensive sister. "Would you like to see what I actually do?" I asked impulsively. Julia looked up surprised. "What do you mean?" "Access Tech. Our office. Our work. Would you like to see it?" "Now? Why not? It's Saturday, so it'll be quiet. Just us." Julia hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd like that very much." We paid for our barely touched drinks and walked the 3 blocks to the Access Tech building. As we approached the modern glass and steel structure, I saw Julia taking it in with new eyes. "This is your garage space?" she asked, clearly surprised by the scale. "We outgrew the garage about 5 years ago," I replied with a small smile. Inside, I gave her a tour of our development labs, testing facilities, and collaborative workspaces. I showed her prototypes of our latest adaptive technologies, explaining how each was designed to address specific accessibility challenges. "This is our pride and joy at the moment," I said, demonstrating a sleek headset with neural sensors. It allows people with limited mobility to control digital interfaces using only their thoughts. The technology has applications beyond accessibility too, which is partly why Pinnacle was interested in the partnership. Julia listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that revealed both her business acumen and her genuine interest. As we concluded the tour in my office, she stopped in front of the wall of user feedback. "Access Tech gave me back my independence," she read from one letter. "For the first time in 15 years, I can work again without assistance." She turned to me, her eyes shining with what looked like unshed tears. "This is what you do, Abby. You change lives." I nodded, suddenly emotional myself. "That's the goal." "And I reduced it to fixing computers for people who aren't tech-savvy," she said, shaking her head in dismay. "I am so sorry." "Why, Julia?" I asked the question that had been haunting me for years. Why has it always been a competition between us? Julia sank into a chair looking out at the Milwaukee skyline through my office windows. I've been asking myself the same question since the party. I think it goes back to when we were kids. You were always the smart one, the one with the big ideas and the determination to make them happen. You were smart too, Julia. You still are, but in different ways, she acknowledged. You were building circuit boards while I was building social networks. You solved problems. I navigated people. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that your kind of intelligence was the kind that mattered more. So I tried to compete on your terms, and when I couldn't, I tried to diminish your achievements instead. Her honesty was disarming. This wasn't the defensive, competitive Julia I was used to. This was someone engaged in genuine self-reflection. I've been thinking about that science fair in 8th grade, she continued. Your water filtration system versus my baking soda volcano. I smiled at the memory. You got more attention. But you got the blue ribbon, she countered. And I was so jealous. Not just of the ribbon, but of how you didn't seem to need the attention. You were satisfied with creating something that worked, something that mattered. I've never had that kind of internal validation. We talked for hours, unraveling years of misunderstandings and competitive patterns. Julia shared how our parents' constant comparisons had shaped her view of herself in relation to me. I admitted that my withdrawal had probably contributed to the distance between us, that I had given up on trying to have a genuine relationship rather than continuing to make the effort. As evening fell, casting long shadows across my office, Julia asked, Do you think we can start over? Not forget the past, but maybe build something different going forward. I'd like to try, I said sincerely, but it has to be based on who we really are, not who we think the other wants us to be. Julia nodded, a genuine smile spreading across her face. I'd like to get to know my sister, the innovative CEO who's changing lives with accessible technology. And I'd like to know my sister, the strategic thinker who navigates complex corporate environments, I replied with an answering smile. 6 months later, I stood backstage at the Pinnacle Technology Conference preparing to deliver the keynote address on the future of accessible technology. Julia waited with me, no longer working for Pinnacle, but for a smaller firm where, in her words, the culture better aligns with my values. The holiday party incident had prompted her to reevaluate not just our relationship, but her career path as well. After several frank conversations with her boss, she had realized that the competitive, often cutthroat environment at Pinnacle was bringing out her worst qualities. Her new position at a women-led technology consultancy offered fewer status symbols, but greater satisfaction and a healthier work culture. Nervous? She asked, straightening my blazer with a sisterly touch. A little, I admitted. Public speaking isn't my natural habitat. You'll be amazing, she assured me. Just talk about the work the way you talked to me that day in your office. The passion comes through. As I stepped onto the stage to address the audience of industry leaders and developers, I caught sight of Julia giving me a thumbs up from the wings. Our relationship wasn't perfect, and we still had moments of falling into old patterns. But we were making progress, learning to see and appreciate each other for who we really were, rather than through the distorted lens of competition. In the end, that was the most meaningful success of all. The thunderous applause following my keynote speech at the Pinnacle Technology Conference still echoed in my ears as I stepped off the stage. Julia was the first to greet me, wrapping me in a genuine hug. You knocked it out of the park, Abby, she beamed. Did you see Frederick Spencer nodding along when you talked about integrating adaptive technologies from the design phase? You've got him completely convinced. I laughed, feeling light with relief and accomplishment. Let's hope so. The more companies that build accessibility into their development process, the closer we get to truly inclusive technology. We made our way to the reception area where conference attendees were gathering for the networking session. Several people approached to congratulate me on the speech, including Catherine Simmons, who had become a valuable ally within Pinnacle. "Abigail, that was exactly the message our development team needed to hear," she said warmly. "And Julia, how lovely to see you again. How's the new position treating you?" "It's challenging in all the right ways," Julia replied with genuine enthusiasm. "I'm learning to measure success differently, focusing on impact rather than just advancement." As Catherine moved on to greet other guests, Julia leaned closer to me. "6 months ago, I would have been jealous of you being the center of attention like this. Now I'm just proud. It's a strange feeling, but a good one." Her candor touched me deeply. We had spent the past 6 months rebuilding our relationship, meeting regularly for coffee or dinner, even collaborating on a small project where Julia's firm had consulted on the marketing strategy for Access Tech's newest product line. Each interaction had been a step toward a healthier dynamic, but this moment of genuine pride from Julia felt like a breakthrough. "Thank you for being here today," I said sincerely. "It means a lot." "Where else would I be for my sister's big moment?" she replied, squeezing my arm affectionately. As we mingled with the conference attendees, I was struck by how differently Julia interacted with people now compared to the holiday party. Gone was the constant self-promotion and status signaling. Instead, she listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in the conversations, rather than looking for opportunities to elevate herself. Later, as we shared a quiet dinner after the conference events had concluded, I broached a subject that had been on my mind. "I've been thinking about Mom and Dad," I began cautiously. "We should visit them together soon. It's been a while since we've both been home at the same time." Julia nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like that. Maybe we could even tell them about our companies collaborating. Dad always said we'd make a good team if we ever stopped competing long enough to work together." "He did, didn't he? I'd forgotten that." "There's a lot I think we both chose to forget or ignore over the years," Julia said, her expression turning reflective. "Like how Mom always pushed me toward more visible achievements because she thought I needed the external validation, while she encouraged your independent streak because she knew you were more internally motivated." I considered this perspective, which Julia had never shared before. "You think Mom was trying to support our different personalities rather than playing favorites?" "I've been seeing a therapist," Julia admitted. "Part of my post-holiday party self-improvement plan. She's helped me recognize some patterns in how I interpret past events. I always assumed Mom favored you because you were smarter, but looking back, I think she was just trying to parent us according to our different needs." This reframing of our childhood opened up a new avenue of healing for both of us. Over dessert, we shared memories comparing our different perceptions of the same events, and finding that the truth often lay somewhere in the middle of our experiences. "Do you remember that career day in high school?" Julia asked. "When I said I wanted to be a CEO and you said you wanted to be an engineer," I nodded, smiling at the memory. "Dad joked that we should start a company together. And here we are, a CEO and a strategic consultant finally collaborating instead of competing," Julia mused. "It only took us 20 years to follow his advice." The evening ended with plans for a joint visit to our parents and a commitment to monthly sister dinners regardless of our busy schedules. As we parted ways outside the restaurant, Julia hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry it took something as dramatic as the holiday party fiasco for me to see what I was doing," she said. "But I'm grateful for where we are now." "Me too," I replied honestly. "Sometimes the most painful moments lead to the most important growth." In the months that followed, our relationship continued to strengthen. Julia visited Access Tech regularly, taking a genuine interest in our projects and even offering valuable insights from her business perspective. I attended events at her new company, supporting her as she built a reputation based on substance rather than self-promotion. The holiday season arrived again, and with it came another corporate party, this time at Julia's new firm. She had specifically requested that I attend as her guest of honor. "No hidden CEOs this time, I promise," she joked when she extended the invitation. Just a chance to celebrate together. The contrast between this event and last year's Pinnacle party couldn't have been more striking. Julia introduced me proudly to her colleagues, accurately describing Access Tech's work and our recent achievements. She seemed comfortable in her own skin, no longer needing to diminish others to feel successful. During the evening, Julia's new boss raised a toast to the team's accomplishments over the past year. When she specifically mentioned Julia's contribution to their recent client acquisition strategy, I felt a surge of genuine pride for my sister. The recognition was well-deserved, based on actual achievements rather than self-promotion. Later, as we stood by the window overlooking the city lights, Julia reflected on her journey. You know, losing that promotion at Pinnacle was the best thing that ever happened to me professionally. It forced me to reevaluate what success really means. And what does it mean to you now? I asked. Doing work that matters, she replied without hesitation. Building relationships based on mutual respect. Finding satisfaction in the process, not just the outcome. She smiled at me. All things you seem to understand intuitively while I was busy chasing external validation. We all find our own path, I said gently. The important thing is that we support each other along the way. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the remarkable transformation in our relationship over the past year. From the humiliation and revelation of the Pinnacle holiday party to the genuine connection we now shared, the journey had been challenging but immeasurably rewarding. Success, I had learned, wasn't just about building a thriving company or securing multi-million-dollar partnerships. It was about creating space for authentic relationships, supporting others in their growth, and finding freedom from the need for external validation. True success included the ability to celebrate others' achievements without feeling diminished by them. Julia had finally learned that lesson too, finding greater fulfillment in a role that aligned with her values than in the prestigious position she had once so desperately pursued. By stepping away from the constant competition that had defined our relationship for decades, we had both found something more valuable than any professional achievement, a genuine sisterhood based on mutual respect and support. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone lit up with a text from Julia. Thanks for coming tonight. Love having my sister in my corner. I smiled, typing a reply, always, that's what sisters are for. Have you ever experienced a moment of truth like this in your own life? A time when someone who underestimated you was forced to see your true value? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this tale of sisterly redemption resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over family drama. Remember that sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect isn't a loud comeback, but simply standing in your truth and letting your accomplishments speak for themselves. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep shining your light, no matter who tries to dim it.